Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to our September meeting. Today is September 18th at about 2:30, and we're having a meeting of the Montgomery County Board of Elections at our office on North Frederick Avenue in Gaithersburg, Maryland. We have a quorum. Mary Ann can't be with us today. She has a family matter she's attending to out of state. So we have a quorum, and we'll begin our meeting. First, we're going to approve the minutes from July 17th.
Before I move, there was some correction need to be done.
Yeah, David. I think this is
Page 7.
page 7, where we're talking about my concern about the polling place changes and everything. And then if you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up.
I'm not booted up yet. Can I look at what you're
Yeah, I just wanted to put this in.
Jim, before we go there, there's a typo on page 2.
You volunteered, and then we approved it.
FIOA should be FOIA.
That's good.
Second paragraph
I do
from the
your
top.
I just wanted to add that.
I do your correction.
Mr. Naaman, the board agreed that Mr. Naaman, who
Lisa, do you see that there?
who volunteered.
would
Page
then you wouldn't delete the word.
No, I'm sorry.
would.
Top of page
Should.
Page 3.
Board members
Should be
agreed that Mr. Naaman, who
FOIA.
volunteered.
Should.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
How about that?
That's fine.
FOIA.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we're back at the minutes of July 17. Alex?
I just alerted Lisa to a typo on the top of page 3. FIOA should be FOIA.
Okay. And on page 7, I showed this to David, in the big paragraph, bottom half, lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the sentence that starts, board members agreed that, as a credit to David, I wanted to add, board members agreed that Mr. Naaman, comma, who volunteered, comma, and then it continues the same, should reach out, everything the same. Anybody else? Any changes?
You have a correction.
Alex?
I also
8.
had a change which I alerted
Page 8.
Lisa to. It would be on page 8. And I've written this up. I printed it out, so I've given a copy to Lisa, and I've showed it to a couple of you here. It's the section near the bottom which talks about my discussion about the turnout. And so I wanted to say, after the semicolon, those figures, instead of tell, say suggest that half the voters are more than likely voting early, period. And new sentence, thus, comma, the impact of the early voting, delete the rest, may have diminished the number of voters who are affected by an election day change in their polling place, period.
Any comments on that? Okay.
As I told Alex, I'm fine.
Oh, good.
And at the beginning, just before the bullet points, where in the indentation earlier in the page where it says only those precincts that the board members agreed to consider, I wanted to say only those precinct changes that the board members agreed to consider
Page 8.
will be listed for public comment.
Page 8
Okay.
on the top.
Any comments? Okay, I think
No.
Any objection to any of these changes? Okay, all those in favor of the minutes as amended, say aye.
No, hold on. I have to move.
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I move we accept the minute based on our changes and the amendment which David made.
Any second?
Yeah.
Second?
I'll second it as long as it includes all the changes that we just discussed.
We
Yeah.
just said all
Yeah.
the changes.
Okay.
Yeah, all the changes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No. Anybody opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. The only change to the agenda is that we're going to have an executive session meeting later in the program.
Is that going to be at the very end?
I think so. Is that what the plan is?
I hope so.
Yes.
Okay. And I may have some new business as well.
Okay. What's in new business?
I'm sorry?
New business?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so public comments. I know Senator Kagan wanted to appear and address us, but we'll allow her legislative, what's the word? I don't know. Mike, what's the legislative privilege?
Legislative prerogative?
Yeah, so if she gets here, we can listen to her at that time. Okay, so public comments. Lisa?
So we do have Mr. Richard Dragana who would like to address the board.
Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Chairman?
How are you, sir?
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, thank you for hearing me. I'm here today to ask you to, I'm not exactly sure how this needs to work, but we need to get copies of the changes, additions, and deletions that you're making to your files. I understand that you submit those to the state on a monthly basis. And so I don't know whether you have to ask permission from the state in order to do this, but if you could just give us a copy of whatever that submission is, either before you send it to the state or after, if the state has to approve it. I don't know what the procedure is. The problem is that when we get a new file from you, we get the entire file, and that file has to then be bounced against our files, and we have to find the duplicates of the people that are resigned, the people that are added, and things of that nature. It's a lot of work. It takes, our party sometimes does it. It takes months, and then we try to get out the vote, and we run into, well, gee, we haven't been here for a year.
Dick, are you referring to polling place changes? Is that what you meant?
No, sir. I'm sure talking to registered voters.
Registered voters.
So in other words, you get each month you get the registered voters from us.
Right.
What you want to know is, can you get the changes from the previous month so you don't have to do it yourself?
Right. So we can actually, what we can do, we keep a separate file. We can bounce those names and addresses by the voter ID against our file, and if they're not there, we add them. And of course, you would show that there are ads. If you change the address, that would show up as a change of address. We'd be able to make it. If the people have deceased or moved out of the state and you're deleting them, we would be able to find that information, and we can do it within 30 days and have the files up to date.
So you're looking for the changes.
Yes, sir.
May I ask Margaret a question? Margaret, approximately, how many, when you send a file to the state for them to put onto their records of people who died or changed, what's the time frame before you get back the okay?
It's instant.
Do you ever get a not okay, or is it just pro forma?
It's the Maryland voter registration database is a robust database. So there's different ways that data will come to us. Some of the data comes to us through the Motor Vehicle Administration, and so if an individual signs up to get a driver's license, and they also sign up to get registered to vote, anywhere from 24 to 72 hours later, we will receive that information. And that is done, and once that changes in, it's instant.
It's instant that it goes, and it's...
We do not possess the ability any longer with this system to segregate out those changes.
The new ones.
The individual political parties and candidates have to do is they purchase a list monthly, and they have to run one database up against the other. And this question has been asked by both political parties. We do not have the capability any longer with this system to provide just the updates.
Can they get it from the state?
The state will give them, they will refer them to a third-party private vendor who will do it for them for a fee. Jessica, do you want to add to that?
No, I think that was a very succinct way of putting that. There isn't any, I can't even run a query or report, or I can get numbers of how many took place, which we publish on our website every month, but there isn't any reports that are available at our user level that allows us to run an actual list of anybody who's canceled because they moved or were deceased or added. We can run some things by registration date, but that's, people move in and out of counties, it's not necessarily an accurate measure.
So you have the numbers, but not the ID of the voter?
That's correct.
But, I mean,
we
you
do
have
not
the
have the
aggregate
names
numbers.
of the individuals.
Right.
And if the political parties or the candidates want that, they need to purchase a list monthly, daily, whatever, and bounce that against the previous list.
Allison?
I think one more piece of information that might help elaborate on what Margaret and Jessica are saying is that the statewide voter registration database is a state database, and we have user privileges. It is not our software product that we have the ownership of, and so as users, we are going in and making discrete individual changes in the state software. So we don't have a batch that we do transmit once a month or in some scheduled period. We have a live changes that we make to voter records as we are keying them into the state database as users.
Okay, I understand. I think I understand what you're saying. Before you send it, though, it is a bunch of different names, right? That you're getting from motor vehicles or people that register here to vote.
No,
What
it's
is
not.
it?
It comes to us electronically.
Some's a green confirmation card, so if somebody sends a confirmation card and says they moved out of state, we'll go into that voter record and we'll put voter canceled, voter, request moved out of state. And that record then becomes canceled. But the system registry logs that date, but it isn't in an interface. I wish I could query it back, because I often get questions about how many things happen at dates and time, and I have no ability to run any type of report to say this particular activity, this many people happened on this particular date, because that's not a field that's...
The appropriate location to request this, if you want, because it would take a software change on the part of the state, is to go to the State Board of Elections and make the request of the State Board of Elections. Otherwise, what happens today is what has been explained to me in the past is that when a political party or political candidate wants to have these changes, they purchase a list, they compare it to the previous list. They either have someone internally on their campaign staff or their political party, and they bounce the list off so that they can cull out whatever, maybe the new voters or changes of address or deceased.
And there's no way alphabetically or numerically or by the calendar to do it in any other manner. Now, what would it take to do that? The state would have to say, we'll let you do it. Is there any way we can get that information?
The state would have to go to the owner of the database and contract to make changes to make that available to the state, who then makes it available to the local.
Who's the owner?
Why is the state not the owner?
Well, the state's the owner. ES&S is the vendor.
The vendor.
That
Right.
maintains it. And so quarterly they do software changes as needed, such as when they integrate the ERIC module, and they pay the company to do different changes.
I guess my point
You
is...
have a good question. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I?
Yeah.
If I understand what's being said, I think Jessica is saying that our staff does not have the ability to produce a list of the changes. If somebody has said what changes were made in the month of August, we could not produce such a list.
Right.
But there's got to be a list.
And it sounds like
what Dick is doing.
okay, and it sounds like the state's not able to produce that list either.
But there's got to be a list.
I don't know what they can do
Yeah,
for
hold
that
on.
for the database.
Okay, but that's kind of my point, because I would think that
There's got to be a list.
there's got to be something. First of all, there's got to be something that you're using in order to enter your changes, because you have to know what to enter. And then, assuming that you don't throw those documents away, you at least have those documents to show what you did. You have the people send you stuff, and you have presumably what they sent. So I guess my question is, do we hold on to that information, and is there any reason?
Exactly.
Is there a legal reason? There may be legal limitations on what we can release, which I understand, but are there any legal impediments to releasing that information?
Like Susan Smith, we're taking Susan Smith off the rolls. We know that Susan Smith's off the rolls. There's no record of that?
There is a record. But the
Here.
problem
Well, that's what Dick is talking about,
right,
getting
but
the
we
names
can't
of
query
people
the
on and
record.
off, right?
So I can tell you that in the month of August, we had 969 subtractions from the county active. That is a voter who went to the MVA, updated their address, and moved to PG County. That's a voter who responded with a confirmation card and said that they moved out of state.
Died?
That's a voter who died. That's a voter through the ERIC module.
Well, we know who they are, right?
But we don't, I can't run a report
Why?
I can run a report of every canceled voter in Montgomery County.
I mean, you haven't.
No, but the 900 and something people, we know who they are. That's what,
But it's electronically stored on the face of every person's record. So if I get asked for your record, I can call up your record and I can see your document you submitted. But what I'm telling you is that it is logged in the state system and there is an entry into the voter log, but I have no ability to query it by that date. So I can't come back with a succinct list. Can I get, but I can't, I mean, I understand what you're asking for, and I think that would be something great for us to have access to also. But I can't.
Is it our staff that makes the changes on the system?
That's correct.
And what do we do with the raw material after we make those changes? If somebody sends it in a note or a letter that
Scan
says...
it to the record. But
Okay.
70% or so of our transactions are electronic, so there is no piece of paper that we receive. It comes in electronic batch.
But can't we print out the electronic MVA thing, that when that comes and says all these people registered to vote, we get it electronically. Now, on my very old computer, I can print that out.
We don't get it as a list like that. It goes into the actual voter registration system, and we open it up in a batch of 25. And one first voter registration agent goes through the 25 in that batch and appends it and updates the voter's record electronically. And then somebody else opens the next batch of 25, and that's how we go through and process them. But we don't get a long list of them that I can print off or look at in a list format.
Again, the appropriate level to request this information is at the State Board of Elections. When we had the mainframe system, yes, we were able to provide that. But this is no longer available at the local board level.
How hard would it be for the local board to keep records of such things?
I don't have the ability to answer that question at this time.
Because it sounds like if the system itself is not capable of producing this report without additional changes to the system, it sounds like the only record that we would have is whatever we receive here that we then use to update the system. And if we were to create our own system for keeping track of the updates, and I realize that might be burdensome and we have to figure out if it's worth the burden, but if that's the only way to do it, it seems like that would accomplish the same goal. And it's like you said, you get the MVA report. I mean, one of the things I'm concerned about, if we, the MVA is kind of one of our greatest hits from the past, but how do we know about people whose party affiliation is changed without their permission if we can't query a list of all the party affiliation changes in the month of August? We have to, the person has to know to come in to complain, and they may not know, in order for us to even detect that it happened, it sounds like.
Margaret, can you have someone look into this to see what we can
To
do?
develop a whole different
Just
database system?
just to see if something can be done for both parties' benefit.
Or something
Like a
by-
screen print.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unreasonable that the parties know each month who came on the list of voters and who came off.
Yes.
I mean, I think that
I will contact the State Board of Elections and describe what your concerns are and see what can possibly be done. Okay? That's what I can promise.
With all
I
the
will do.
so-called smart people in computer business, it seems to me this ought to be relatively simple to put a little, one of the other little things by everybody's name that we can push buttons and find this out.
Yeah, if you can ask, and also if there's anything we can do,
I can also point out, is that the state's position when previous boards have brought this issue to the state board is they would suggest that is the role of the private sector, and that's what they've said. So I will once again go back to the state board and talk to them about this and whether or not that we have the ability to develop a secondary database to respond to this request.
Dick?
If I may,
Sure, Dick.
but I understand that this can't be done locally, that it has to be a state thing. And that's really what I'm here to ask you to do, is to ask the state to make the modification so that you can have this ability, so you can pass that ability along to us, and you can charge us for it. I think that every one of the organizations would be willing to pay, I don't know how much, but a certain amount. And the other thing is that I'm going to be going to all the other counties and asking them to approach their boards to do the same thing to the state, and I'm going to be going to the Central Committee for the Democrats
Good,
and
that was
asking
what I
them
was
to
gonna
do the same
suggest.
thing.
Yeah.
So we're all going to be doing this over the next 30 days or so. I wanted to let you all know and ask you if you would please do that.
Well, we will.
Thank you very much.
Dick.
Thank you, Dick. Anybody else on the list, Lisa?
Let me ask you a question. I should have brought this up when you asked about changes to the agenda, but at our last meeting, I think we discussed the possibility of changes in our pricing and in using credit cards for discs.
Okay.
And I didn't know if that's something that we said then we were going to discuss
Yeah,
it
we
at our
could-
next
Can we
meeting.
do it as it old business?
Oh, yeah.
Or I can cover it under the
Huh?
budget,
Yeah,
whichever
let's-
you
sure.
prefer.
Yeah, during
Welcome.
the budget.
Just didn't want to let it slip.
Good.
Maybe during the budget.
Welcome, Senator.
Hello, how are you, Jim?
And because of legislative privilege, we're going to ask you. We just had our public comments, and we were going to wait for you, so please
Okay.
join us.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Welcome, Senator Kagan.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Thank you. Hello, Allison. Hello, everybody. I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and I have none of my printouts and none of my notes in front of me, so I'm just going to run through this quickly to not interrupt the flow of the meeting. Thank you for indulging me in showing up here. I have several things I want to run through, and we can do some follow-up so as not to take the time on your agenda on some of these if you like. I want to offer you courtesy on a couple legislative items. I want to mention something about early voting sites, and I just want to mention a hearing that my committee had last week. So I'll start with that. As you all know, election security is foremost in many of our minds, all of our minds, I think, to make sure that we have fair, accurate, and uncorrupted election results. There were a bunch of consultants that were brought in, and there were a lot of questions asked in Annapolis, and I'm not sure whether you all were able to listen in or watch it streaming, but I know that it's something that we will all continue to monitor. Second, early voting sites. Since my chief of staff is getting married on Saturday, and so I'm unable to join you at the public hearing. So I want to express my thoughts about one of the early voting sites, and that's the site that I know that is one of the options in Wheaton. And I'm speaking in this section of my comments on behalf of several of my colleagues, and I only started last night trying to reach out to my 7 Senate colleagues, but I am speaking on behalf of Senator Feldman, Senator King, Senator Madaleno, Senator Smith, and trading calls with my other colleagues about a concern for the value of the separation of church and state, and the concern about having a church or any faith institution as an early voting site, and especially when there are other options such as the Holiday Park Center, Schweinhaus Center, or the back of Wheaton Plaza. So we wanted to encourage you to strongly consider those as preferable sites.
Can you repeat those? Holiday
This
Park?
is what I understand from the community, is that there's a section, and I guess I talked to Ellie Giles, sort of behind Wheaton Plaza, Westfield, in Wheaton, that Holiday Park is a good option, and then Schweinhaus Center. And I understand there are pluses and minuses at each location. I know that, and I've spoken here before about the perhaps subtle influence of a faith location, as I've experienced in District 17. And I personally just think that, where possible, when there are other options, especially when they're free to us, that we should consider retaining the wall between church and state, and especially in our early voting sites, since we've never done that before. And the last thing I wanted to do was talk about some of my legislative agenda as it relates to election laws, and we can either engage briefly on that here, or I'm happy to hear from you, Margaret, or Allison, or anyone on your staff, or from any of the members, either as a group or individually at any time. Ranked choice voting is something that is getting more and more attention, and I'm sure that you all know about it, but in case there's anyone who's listening online or unaware, rather than just voting for 1 or 2 people, or for county council for up to 4, it would allow in this next year, hypothetically, with 350 people running for at-large county council, the person who would be my 5th choice gets no support from me that's more than the person who would be my 348th choice. And ranked choice voting is being used in jurisdictions around the country, and I'm vice chair nationally of the National Conference of State Legislators Elections and Redistricting Committee, and so I was privy to a number of really educational briefings, and I have now been inspired by how that opportunity can reflect voter intent more effectively than just vote for 1 or vote for up to 4. And so I'm going to be proposing with some of my colleagues legislation. I may bring in, Margaret, just so you know, 2 bills, one that would be a local bill and one that would be authorizing for statewide. So we'll see. We're still putting that all together, so I do not have the bill drafted yet. I'm happy to share that with you when I get it, but would love to hear your thoughts about it, and if there's any tweaking or clarifying. I personally wish I had a magic wand so that we could actually put it in place were it to be the legislative delegation and the legislature's wish that we could start it right away. I wish we could do it by next June. I think that's not going to happen, and so I'm not even going to try for that. But again, what a great laboratory we could be for ranked choice voting than with our at-large county council bonanza that we're going to have next June and next November. So that's one.
May I ask you a question about that?
Please.
How do you feel about, instead of having, for the House of Delegates, instead of having them alphabetical, have just them pick names out of a hat of who goes first and second, so we don't have people listed alphabetically on the ballot?
So currently it's not alphabetical, it's by majority party and minority party,
Right.
and then
But then
alpha
alphabetical.
within that, so it's
Yes.
not all
Yeah,
alpha.
I'm saying
Yes.
do away with that.
Yes,
Just have it
it's not
alphabetical.
something that's ever been proposed. I have given it no thought and heard of no place that has done it that way, but I'm happy to listen to your thoughts about it. Another issue that we're bringing back, and I would actually really like to learn from you about this. There was a question, and again, this came from a National Conference of State Legislators, where there have been laws passed in other states about international observers and academic observers. So in other states, and it's seen as a little bit best practices to make sure that we clarify who can have access to the polling places. We don't want anyone who's disruptive. We don't want necessarily a lot of random people that you guys don't know about in advance beyond those that, can get the certification from a candidate and all that. So international observers, there is some conversation that the State Department would rather hear from one entity, like the State Board of Elections, rather than in Maryland, 24 different jurisdictions. Is this person from Azerbaijan kosher with you? Is this person from Greece okay with you? And just have one entity submit one list and their backgrounds and bios, any security checks, any background, and then pass that along. My understanding is that Montgomery County gets the disproportionate percentage of our international visitors, and so the question of whether you guys prefer to continue doing that and how that works, how you work with the state board, and again, we can have that conversation another time if you like. The question of academic observers, same question, and we're deciding whether to even include them in this, because I think international, especially in all the conversation that's going on about Russia and everything else, I think that's the more pressing issue, and I'm not sure whether the academicians are having some of the same challenges. But I remain open to hearing your thoughts about that. The one other bill that I'll mention to you, which came up, and I've spoken to a few of you about this because it was my experience in the April 2016 election, was that I showed up in a number of precincts where there were a lot of ticked off voters because they showed up during early voting and they wanted to cast a ballot, and they were inspired either by a candidate they loved or a candidate they didn't love. And so if a voter had never been registered before, they could walk in, they could register to vote, they could affiliate, and they could cast a partisan ballot and say, I want to be a Democrat or I want to be a Republican, and they could vote. On the other hand, their next door neighbor, who let's say has been registered since they were 16 as an independent, as a decline, walks in during early voting and wants to cast a ballot in a Democratic or Republican primary, and they were not allowed. And so they had stood in line and they were told, you can vote for Board of Ed, isn't that great? But you can't vote in the presidential primaries or for Senate, Congress, or any of the other races that were on the ballot. And they were peeved, and they felt disenfranchised, and they felt like they were treated unequally and had a different access to the ballot. So I had a bill that we're bringing back that was about, at any time that someone who has never been registered can come in, register, affiliate, and cast a partisan ballot, that someone else who is a decline should be able to come in during that same period, choose to affiliate, and cast a ballot.
To affiliate.
To affiliate and cast a ballot. So, to be clear, I personally do not support open primaries. I think our closed primary system works just fine. But so it wouldn't be a Republican deciding to vote with the Democratic primary or a Democrat deciding to switch to Republican. There are earlier deadlines for that.
So you couldn't switch parties?
Couldn't switch parties past the deadline that already exists. But if they are unaffiliated, that they should be able to come in and cast a primary ballot. And then they would be affiliated. And if they wanted to unaffiliate again or affiliate with the other party, they would need to complete those forms. But it seems to me that someone who has been affiliated, and maybe they've just only voted in general elections, and so they never even knew that we had closed primaries. They even never knew that they were going to be precluded from voting in a presidential primary, in a senatorial primary, gubernatorial primary. I don't think they should be less able to cast that ballot than folks who have never, ever been registered at all. So I've spoken to the Attorney General about this. There are a lot of folks who think this makes common sense. Some of my colleagues are a little scared that people would bus in unaffiliated voters to come in and choose and vote against them, which I thought was a little crazy. But there will be, there's a delegate who reached out to me who thinks this is a great idea and is going to sponsor this on the House side, and we will be coming back with that. So if you have any questions or thoughts about that, I would love to hear them. Again, I'm happy to listen to anything you've got now or hear back from any of you as a group or individually. Yes, Alex?
Senator Kagan, one thing that occurs to me, and I'm not sure if this would happen, but I guess it raises the possibility that we could make same-day registration just overwhelmed, crammed, if that's when it's going to happen. You know what I mean? But this would be when it would happen, right? During same-day registration, during early voting?
During early voting only, because that's the time that folks can do that. And I'm not sure that the numbers would be huge. So we actually did a search through the van of people who were unaffiliated and who then cast a provisional ballot or came out to vote. And in District 17, which is 1/8 of the county, there were, I want to say it was 197 people. It might have been 297. It was a modest number of folks. So we're not talking about endless thousands and thousands of people who try to do this. But there were people who were really motivated to vote in the primaries this year, perhaps unlike we've seen before, or certainly not in a long time. And again, whether they were coming in excited to vote for or against a candidate, they were not happy that the door was slammed in their face and they were offered either a provisional ballot or a ballot for Board of Ed.
So, Kevin, would that mean that those provisional ballots were necessarily rejected?
they were rejected.
Oh, yeah.
No, they
Yeah.
would be rejected.
Yeah.
If you're unaffiliated and you insist upon getting either Republican or Democrat,
Right.
it would be, you'd get a provisional ballot and it'd be rejected.
Right.
Well, and
and
not
so
the-
they were then disenfranchised totally, because then they didn't even get to vote for school board. Like, everything was tossed out. Sorry.
But I was just going to say, though, that the numbers
right.
that you refer to would be far greater if the rules were different, because there's a certain percentage of the voters, probably a large percentage, who, if they're told you can only vote in the general, you can vote for school board in the primary, they will accept their ballot to vote in the, for school board and move on. They wouldn't necessarily cast a provisional ballot.
That's right.
And they were told, and I had different experiences and different conversations in different precincts. And Margaret was totally clear, like, it's not going to count. And there were some election, head judges that were completely clear, it won't count, don't do this, here's your ballot for school board. And there were some who at some point just didn't want to have the argument. Fine, like, seriously, it's not going to work, but here you go, if it'll make you happy. I get it that you stood in line and all that, and thank you for coming out, but we had a lot of ballots that were thrown out, and I think that was the explanation for a lot of them. People don't know, and especially think about, they're 40-something, and they registered to vote when they were 16, 17, 18. They had no idea what independent or unaffiliated meant. They just thought, I want to vote the person, not the party. I mean, how often do we all hear that? All the time. They didn't know that they would be precluded, bless you, precluded from ever voting in primaries for anything meaningful.
Senator
Not with no disrespect to my friends on the school board, which is half our budget. Yes.
One other question, just so I know what you're talking about. When you say ranked choice voting,
Yes.
what do you mean?
Thank you for asking that. So currently, for let's say, and the easiest example truly is the at-large county council race, where it says you can vote up to 4, and people can vote for 1, 2, or 3, 4 out of 20,
Yeah.
30, 50, 10, whichever the final number ends up being. And so the 5th choice person and the 10th choice person get the equal amount of love for me, which is 0, right? Ranked choice voting allows me, the voter, all of us as voters, to say, this is the person I am most excited about. I want, that person is my number 1 choice. And then the second person, she's really good too. And the third person, yeah, he's all right. I like him a lot. And the fourth one, and you can rank, and you can choose to rank all 10 or 20 or 30, or you can stop at 7, because now you've never heard of anybody. And you can stop, which would be kind of an undervote in the same way we do. So our voting machines can be used for ranked choice voting currently. It's just a question of how the votes are tabulated, and there is software that's available, and there are processes that are going on, and it's growing and expanding as more and more entities, more and more jurisdictions are doing this or enacting this, and so we're gonna have the conversation about Maryland.
So, in your view, how would it work that only the first top 4 choices of each person would count, or if they voted more than 4, it would not count?
No, neither of those, actually. So let's say there were 10 candidates, to use your example. And let's say I vote for the top 8, and I've never heard of these other 2 people. So and again, I've listened to webinars and watched demos. You can so get in the weeds, and the mathematicians and the statisticians and the way it all works. But ultimately, I'll use a quick example. I had a staff retreat with my team, and we were going out. I was buying Popeyes for lunch. I shouldn't even do the commercial endorsement here, but it was, what sides do we all want? And so I made a list. It was like, let's do ranked choice voting for our sides. And so I wrote coleslaw, mashed potatoes, green beans, corn on the cob. I wrote them all, and everyone ranked which ones they liked the best. And ultimately, we went through and we picked. The way it works out is that nobody gets their last choice as their only choices. And everybody ends up pretty pleased with the way it came out. And so it reflects the voter intent better and gives sort of more oomph to the candidates that you like best. Is the simplest way I can describe it. But there are webinars and PowerPoints, and it's how to describe something that's a little complex in a pretty simple way when presenting to this group or to legislative stuff. And again, I'm not super expert in the weeds on all that, but ultimately every vote would count, whether you cast 1 or 2 or 5 votes, or whether you vote the entire ballot and rank into number 37.
But how many, what would the final result be? Would the rule be that they only count, in terms of deciding who wins?
Right.
I guess.
Ultimately, you sit there and say, okay, these candidates don't have enough support. Like, you total up all the numbers, and you start sort of deleting candidates at the bottom because they don't have enough support.
And that was going to be my question.
Yeah.
Is the system that the person who's at the very bottom drops off
Yes.
and their votes are redistributed, or is there a certain number of people? And then if you elect somebody, if somebody gets an outright majority,
Yes, then they're done.
okay, now is that vote done? If I voted as one of my 4 votes for that person,
Right.
does anything happen to that vote after they're elected, or is it merely that it's done and you go to my other 3?
You go to the rest of the other 8, the other however many.
Right.
And it sort of continues until after votes are redistributed. Then you figure out, and one candidate at a time reaches the magic number, and is therefore elected or a nominee.
Under that, though, couldn't someone who's like the most popular number 4 win?
Yes. Yep.
Even though someone else got more votes?
It would be so.
Let's say someone has a lot of one.
So I'm going to suggest, Jim, Mr. Chairman, this is probably not urgently on your agenda, but and I'd be happy to come back and be officially on the agenda with a little bit of a demo if that's useful to you, or I can send a link to staff who can share it or whatever. It's a little complicated, and I don't want to be inexact in my explanation, but the reason why it's gaining steam is because it's seen as more reflective of voter intent and voter passion.
Would your proposal be to have this implemented for primaries, generals, both, and for every office, or only certain offices?
Those are exactly the conversations we're in now. I was originally thinking that county council, which is such a nightmarish crowd right now, that's what would be most common sense. Some of my colleagues believe that rather than having 2 different kinds of voting, that maybe we do it for sheriff and state's attorney, and it's just everyone all the time. And so people just get used to being able to rank. And if you think about, you're going out for ice cream. Okay, so Rocky Road's my favorite, but if we're going to share and you're going to get mint chip, that's my second choice. And so sure, it's okay, but don't make me vanilla, because that's my last choice. So we do it every time in our daily life. And so it's an opportunity to do that as we vote as well. And
Is there any chance of having that you'd need a runoff with that?
no, it's called instant runoff is another title for it. That's a great question, because voters don't have to come back because they've already expressed. If my first choice person doesn't get it, here's the next best person, and here's the next best person. Yep. And they don't have to come back because we already know what they think of each of the candidates. So it's a fascinating new wrinkle, and again, I think we'll all be learning more about it and hearing more about it. And so I just want to give you, as I said, sort of a courtesy heads up of what I'll be working on next year, because we'd love your insights. And
can your legislation include funding for the software?
Yeah, right. So if there are no questions or comments further for me, I just encourage you to please be prudent and thoughtful in your selection of the weekend voting site, and I appreciate your listening and hearing my thoughts on that and on everything else. And as always, thank you for your service to our Board of Elections.
So is your testimony, is your statement that you prefer the Holiday Park Center? Is that?
I wouldn't presume to dictate where or suggest where. I'm going to suggest not church.
Yeah.
Okay.
And beyond that, you guys are the experts as to parking and the size and the electrical outlets, and that's your domain. But there are certainly other locations and other options.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
guys.
you.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did we have anybody else on the speakers list?
No, Mr. President.
Okay. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Okay. Margaret, Election Director's Report.
Yes, personnel, IT hired and relieved some temporary staff to perform some required maintenance on voting units and install batteries on at least, I think it was like a third of our electronic poll books. There will be 2 more deliveries of approximately 1,000 batteries that'll have to be installed, and hopefully that will take place in the next 6 to 8 weeks. As we receive them, we'll bring back the temporary staff. Then budget, Margie?
Okay. In your advance packet, you received 2 spreadsheets, both through August 8, one for FY17, one for FY18. I'll start with FY17. Since that spreadsheet was sent out, I have received communication from the Office of Management and Budget. The final numbers for the Board of Elections for FY17 show a deficit of $160,705.80. That was broken up $153,629.37 personnel, which is directly related to overtime expenditure, which we have discussed numerous times here, so I'm not going to take time to go any further on that. And the remaining $7,076.43 is related to operating expenses, which is related to printing costs. Our budget allocation for printing was $122,646. We had requested additional funding through the future fiscal impact process for printing. We actually had projected an expenditure of over $200,000 in printing, and are pleased to be able to say that we kept our expenses to only $165,000, so we were far under what we expected, but that still brought us over what the budget allocation was. And once again, this year in our future fiscal impact, we have requested additional funding for printing. So total deficit for FY17, 160,705.80. Office of Management and Budget is beginning the process of the paperwork that's required to perform a county council transfer, and that basically is a department, another county department that had a surplus. Money will be shifted over to our department so that we end the year flatline. So if you have any questions about FY17, I'll be happy to answer those. Otherwise, I'll move on to FY18.
Thank you.
You're welcome. FY18, again, you received a spreadsheet through August 8th. Unfortunately, I was out of town and then had another issue, and I've not been able to run an updated spreadsheet for you. I will get that to you within the next week, 10 days maximum. What I can report, just a very quick check of the numbers in advance of today's meeting. We've currently spent 6.21% of our budget for FY18. We have spent $292,000 in personnel and $218,000 in operating. Now, I do want to add a little caveat to that. Of the $218,000 for operating, $208,000 of that really are the encumbrances that we have carrying over from last fiscal year, and so we've really only spent about $10,000 in operating expenses.
Do we have the state anything? Or do we have any outstanding bills from the state?
We do not have any outstanding bills from the state, no.
Okay.
So, again, I apologize for not being able to get the latest spreadsheet prepared in time for this meeting, but I will get it out to you as soon as possible. And we'll certainly, when you receive it, you have any questions, please feel free to contact me.
Thanks, Margie. David, you want to talk about that subject of
Which one?
the
I can,
charges for fees? I mean,
I
the
can
one
just-
which you talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
I can just slide into
Okay.
that.
Good.
Maybe I'll answer your questions, Mr. Naaman, and if not,
I have to remember what they were.
Well, essentially what my notes reflected were that the board had asked us to go back and see how often we were selling the products that we were requesting an increase in. And upon going into the weeds a bit further on that, really staff is no longer recommending that we move to a credit card for the department. For the, let's see, for the words will come in a second.
Okay.
They will get here. I know they will get here. For the previous fiscal year, we sold about 136 voter notification cards. That's a $1 cost. That was certainly nothing we were going to accept a credit card for. The CDs, only 14, according to the records that I was provided, only 14 were sold. And the binder, which was the big ticket item, there were absolutely none of those sold. And so because of the cost of the fees associated with the credit card, the staff is not really recommending that we move forward with that. Individuals who want to utilize a credit card to purchase voter registration information can do that at the State Board of Elections directly. The state does take credit cards for their purchases. And other than that, we feel that the cash or checks that we currently take would be sufficient.
And does that mean that you're no longer recommending price changes, given that it would raise very little money?
You know, I will be honest and say that that's not really a follow-up conversation that I had with the director. I can certainly have that conversation. My personal opinion, I think there is still a change that should be made, but why don't you give me the ability to discuss that with Ms. Jurgensen over the next month, and I'll come back next month and say whether we're recommending anything or whether we want to leave it the same.
Okay.
Is that reasonable?
Yep.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Margie.
Mm-hmm.
Voter registration, Jessica?
Last time we met, we were working on the latest installment of the ERIC and the National Change of Address to do list maintenance. We've completed that activity. As of today, we have 646,169 active voters and 75,927 inactive voters.
In addition to.
75,000
Right,
inactive.
those are broken out. Yeah.
75,000 inactive, Jessica?
75,927, so almost 76,000. And that is not included in the 646,000.
Okay. Then State Board of Elections. I meant to say at the very beginning, public notice of the board meeting was posted on September 8th, and the public notification requirement was posted on September 13th of this year. The State Board of Elections sent to the staff their advice in terms of the pre- and post-election meeting notification related to public notice in advance of local board meetings affecting voter rights. Margie and Kevin were consulted in terms of how we proceed on getting that public notice. It is on the website. There is a public notice posted on the door, and that's what we will be doing for the future. So if in this particular instance for this month, we were discussing the 5 early voting locations, so we posted that notification on our website. Usability study is in the process with the State Board of Elections, utilizing the University of Maryland at Baltimore in terms of the absentee ballot instructions and the application to make it a cleaner product in terms of being able to read it, fill it out correctly, hopefully, and get it so that when we receive it, we can process it in the most effective way. They're taking comments on that application, and did they close it? Or
Yeah,
is it
we
closed?
commented on it.
We've commented, and has it, but I think it closed on Friday.
Yeah, I think it's
on the
closed this
15th.
month.
The ballot marking device. The State Board of members have requested an expanded discussion with input by the members of the public and other interested stakeholders regarding the level of use that should occur in the 2018 election cycle. I did ask the State Board of Elections to allow Montgomery County Board of Elections to weigh in on the matter, including the expanded use of the ballot marking device. The Montgomery County Board of Elections, I believe, needs to expand the use of the ballot marking device to address the multiple ballot styles and to prevent lines. The current restriction of the ballot marking device of 1 ballot marking device per early voting site, and of course 1 per polling place, really isn't a very efficient or effective use of this resource. We believe that by improving the demonstrations of the ballot marking device and allowing more citizens to use this type of ballot should be explored. The ballot marking device is going to be the exact same ballot marking device that you saw last cycle. It will only allow 7 named candidates per screen. So in many instances, we could expect one race would be spread across 2, 3, maybe even 4 screens when you look at that at large. The September State Board meeting will seek input from candidates, campaigns, and other interested parties. And the October meeting, the State Board will continue this discussion into the October meeting. If this board wishes to weigh in on the topic, the board should begin to formulate a recommendation. I do believe that with several issues that the staff is looking at in terms of training election judges as well as voters, and that is we're going to have anywhere from a minimum of 47 up to 65 different ballot styles in the primary. One of the advantages of the ballot marking device is that when you check in your card, this card would be checked in, and then it encodes the correct ballot. It does a barcode up here and encodes the correct ballot style, and it will improve the quality of the ballot issuance by our election judges. Now, I realize that we're also going to be handing out one of the 65 regular standard 8.5 by, I'm sure it'll be a 17-inch ballot for this election. But if you have someone who's comfortable with the technology, that has experienced it with the outreach, and Huberto, you drag the ballot marking device out with the scanner. We think that this will help move the lines along, and so that's one of the things. That's one of the reasons I'm making this recommendation. As I said, the state board is listening to different folks, and I really wanted to make sure. They originally were going to have just the local boards of elections comment in August, but because I didn't have an opportunity to, get your input, I asked that your input be allowed to at least be delayed till September and maybe even October.
Too quick. Go ahead.
Margaret, just to refresh my recollection, what was the biggest issue we were dealing with? That ES&S was ultimately unable to deliver a solution that allowed all the names to be displayed on a single screen?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
There's two issues. One is the number of candidates you can see on one screen. Now, they did make a change in the number of candidates you can see if the state board had accepted the change, and I think you can now see 14 candidates. But they did not change the negotiating, how you negotiate from page to page to page. Navigate. Do that word thing.
Can you be a little more specific about what happens when you what the navigation issue is?
Janet, do you have a card that we can show to people?
While she's getting that, Morgan, how is that ballot marked? When somebody goes to get a, say, I walk in and I want to I'll vote on the machine. What's written at the top? My precinct? How does the machine know?
It's a barcode. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a barcode.
That you'll have all the precinct there,
All
they
the
pick up, so there'll be one of those for 250 different precincts.
No.
It's printed at check-in. The barcode is printed at
They
check-in.
put my name in
On the poll
on the book, on the poll. Got it.
And there's a secondary printer where we insert the top of this.
Okay, that's what I'm looking at.
And
it creates a barcode unique to you.
A barcode which would depict your political party, obviously for the primary, and precinct.
Okay, that's all I want to know.
Which then ties
And
to
all
ballot
of these,
style.
there's lots of these available for rent.
Yes,
We have them.
They're sitting downstairs.
How many
It's
do we
not being
have?
used.
How many do we have?
Printers?
These?
No, those.
No, of these we have
The machine.
We have how many?
532, I think, of ballot marking devices. And we have 400.
Are they telling us we only have
press
one?
collectors.
Downstairs collecting
Yes.
dust.
And the printers that go with them, we have never used.
Okay. So, basically,
Not
this
really.
is,
I'm gonna.
this is another thing that really needs to change, is the demonstration ballot. This demonstration ballot is, well, number one, it's too long. It takes too long to demo it based on the few fairs. I mean, Roberto does 1,000 fairs a year. I only do a couple, but one of the things that is that it only allows, of course, these 7 names. And then, let's say I vote for this. There's the more. So now I want to go back. It took me all the way back as opposed to seeing it page by page.
So it takes you to the
So-
first page.
So one of the concerns last year about the navigating on the touchscreen when we did the demonstration was the usability was kind of not user-friendly.
Keep your voices up for the, yeah.
It wasn't user-friendly. So one of the concerns we have for outreach is, in the beginning we were demonstrating the equipment. We saw some of the flaws. We communicated with the state, but then also we trained our outreach team members to make sure that certain points of references were communicated to the voter so it would avoid errors. Then midstream, with the issue of the inability to split the screen, then they basically pulled the ballot marking device to be used during early voting as the specs were written. So then what happened was we had to pull, per se, the usage of the ballot marking device, and we went all paper. Okay, so here it says except for ADA, so it was used as the ADA voting equipment. So here, when you pick, I'll pick the next screen. So favorite drink, obviously there's more than the 7 candidates. Once you hit more to see the other, there's a write-in. So I'm just going to write, water. I'll use the next example. It's the next screen that is more complicated. Here. Okay, so favorite Olympic sports. There's 7 selections here. You could choose up to 2. So I'm going to choose one here. If the voters' concern was, well, I'm not going to pick any other sports. I really don't like anything other than diving. I hit next. They added this looping. So it loops. They want to allow you to go forward. This was done midstream while we were doing outreach. So after a couple of months, this was brought to their attention. This was the workaround. So you hit OK, and then it takes you back to the first screen of this particular contest. When I hit more, it shows me the other 5 selections. The issue is, if I go, when you hit previous, which is intuitive, because of previous equipment that we had, it takes you back to the previous contest as opposed to the first screen of the contest. Previous screen. So this is the previous contest move favorite season. The one we were looking at was favorite Olympic sports.
And what happens if you vote for 2 on the first page and
It's
then
still
try to...
not going to let you go. It's
Well,
going to say you have to look at all
Right,
of the
but
selections.
I want to see what happens when you go back.
So here, so on this one, if I hit 2 and I hit, so
No,
it will
this
go
one
next.
goes-
It will go to the next one.
Right.
Now to go back, it goes to that favorite Olympic sports, to that previous contest, because it presented the second page of that particular contest. So if I go to that second page, it shows once it presents the 5 additional selections in that contest.
It takes you back to the second.
No, now it allows you to
Not
move
good.
forward. Before, until you saw that second screen, it'll just keep on looping
How
in
come
that
they
contest.
couldn't
But the
do
issue
it?
that we brought to the attention
After
of the state
2016,
board
they're
was,
supposed
so
to
yeah,
correct
so
it,
yeah,
they
exactly. This
didn't.
more button,
And the
when
chairman
you
of
go
the state
to
board was upset.
more,
The time I was
it
there.
should technically, the usability would stay here in the same location, now moves up. So your eyes are guided to here. And all that recommendations were forwarded to the state. So the focus, what they saw was the looping to ensure that voters would see all of the candidates in that particular contest. But this bar of more would say, per se, I would like to, our recommendation was back.
Yeah.
Because more, for me, and the same location, because more for me says more candidates, but it should say back.
You said it's a more
It
button.
says more.
More actually means back.
Yes.
So you hit more.
We hit more,
And it takes you to the
and it goes
previous
back
page.
to the previous as opposed to back. So they got all those recommendations. So it was challenging for the outreach team, even so then we had to bring the team back,
It's not
go
good.
through the demonstrations, tweak it to ensure that all that what I communicated to you, we communicated to the voter. And so a demonstration that should have taken originally a couple, like a minute or two, literally took several minutes. Because of all
Why do we think that this is going to make lines move faster? It sounds like it's pretty complicated.
No, it won't make them look. No, this made it go slower, and so that's the reason the state pulled and used the ballot marking device as the ADA equipment, and every voter got paper.
Right, but I thought that the rationale we just heard was to make the lines move faster.
Well, if we have the opportunity to demonstrate it more frequently, that was the reason I suggested that the board discuss the possibility. Now, I just wanted to make sure that the board had the opportunity to have this discussion, because the thing is, with 45 to 65 ballot styles, and even though we're going to purchase some equipment to help us pull the correct ballot style, one of the advantages to this system is that when you encode it on the printer, the person will definitely get the correct ballot style. Whereas if they have to go to the next table, and there's, this huge cart that we're going to have to purchase with the 65 ballot styles, instead of maybe pulling ballot style 45, it's been a long day, the lighting's not so great, they pull out ballot style 48. I mean, 5 and 8 might look similar if you've been working for 14 hours. So I'm just trying to anticipate, well, Margie would suggest borrow trouble, but I am thinking that we should have a discussion about whether or not you want to make the pitch that we should be allowed to have additional ballot marking devices. And if you don't, that I just want to make sure you have the
Well, if it
opportunity.
works.
Well, that's a big.
I mean, if it works.
That's a big question.
Yeah.
Well, it would
Yeah.
work if people have an opportunity to interact with it. And this particular piece of equipment, this express vote, has been used in 2 other jurisdictions. And I did ask the staff to try to reach out to those 2 other jurisdictions, and they used it on election day in lieu of paper ballots. But we haven't had an opportunity to get back and hear from them. Yeah.
I actually went to DC and observed and kept line tracking, and it was 3 times as fast as the paper. They did both.
But right now, as we talk, there are 13 filed Democrats for county council at large. There's going to be
with 20 expected.
Yeah, there's going to be 4 or 5 pages of candidates for one office. If I'm a candidate on page 4, I'm not going to be happy. Or page 3.
But Jim, I think the question is, overall, with all of its flaws, is the reducing or eliminating the potential for error in the ballot style worth that trade-off? I guess.
Because the paper ballot, all the candidates can be on one page.
That is the question.
If they get the right ballot.
But
If one quick question that's technical, is there any way that we could, low tech, have it say back instead of more? There's no way we could tape over the more word and write back on it?
Jackie, you'll remember, this is Mary Ann right here, she would be
blowing up.
She'd be very exercised about it, because you'll recall this is the state board or the state staff said that this problem would be resolved in 2000.
That's right.
It's not been used in 2016, 2018. It would be available, and it's a very valuable tool for early voting. But
The chairman of the state board,
as a
matter of fact, the chairman of the state board was very upset and asked the director, said, how come we could not solve the problem after 2016, which they promised to do it?
Yeah, if we could print
I don't
out
know
a
what
ballot
happened now.
at
Maybe
the early
September.
voting sites for everybody's appropriate, that would be great, but it's got to work.
Well, it would work,
Yeah,
but the issue then is the issue you just brought up, that you're talking about if you have 20 candidates.
We will.
That would appear across, there's no write-in candidates in the primary, but that would appear across 3 screens.
With the possibility that if you are on the second page and you hit the button, you end up in a different race, making it harder to vote for someone on the second page than on the first page. Which means that everybody who's in the alphabet after about D is going to have a lawsuit, possibly, because they will be, because it'll be harder to pick them than it will be to pick the people on the first page.
If you're a candidate and you're not on the first page,
You're in trouble.
you're in trouble.
Alison.
Well, I just was going to sort of clarify. I think there's really 2 questions on the table, and the first is the question of using the ballot marking devices as they were originally intended, which was originally it was going to be for early voting. This is what we were going to be using instead of the pre-printed paper ballots. Using the ballot marking device for the purpose of making it of preventing election judges from handing a voter the wrong ballot style. And that's sort of the first question on the table. Then there is another question, which is the extent to which we make them available for accessibility reasons. And last election, even though we didn't make it the primary method anywhere and we didn't really get the benefit to use it to prevent election judges from handing out the wrong ballot style, we did go to the state board and get a little bit of an expanded ability to at least send 2 ballot marking devices to some sites because we simply, saw more of a need for voters to use it for its accessibility purposes.
Was it a problem in 2016, getting people wrong ballots?
Yes, there were several precincts that definitely made mistakes.
Did we have paper that we handed people when we handed them a ballot or available that explained 1, 2, 3, 4, and if it says this?
The ballot marking device? Oh, yeah, definitely.
Or
Kevin.
I remember
Kevin and I both
what I
voted
thought.
on a ballot marking device, and they read it to you.
Yeah, they walk you
The
over and read
whole
the whole
thing.
thing.
Yeah.
So, they read the whole thing, and then they showed you, demoed it, and then they let you vote. It was a very the state's process did not make it any easier to vote because you had to sit there for you could have gotten through the paper faster.
The layout is, it's like the sort of old websites you would get with frames where you've got this outside ring with the buttons that go previous and next to allow you to navigate between contests. And then in the inside ring with that more button is the way you navigate between the earlier and the later screens within a contest. It's not intuitive, and that's the usability problem with it, and the text in the software that explains that and enables you to navigate is not intuitive. I think the thinking is that if the board wanted to go ahead and enable us to, or ask the state to enable us to use it for its original purpose, we would just need to provide some very, we would need to use our outreach teams. We'd need to really sort of message that and presumably put some signage in the polling place that would explain how to navigate the screen.
Alison, even if it worked perfectly, people early voting, you get your ballot printed out. To me, it's so unfair for candidates that are not on the first page. If I'm a candidate running for a year for state delegate and my last name begins with a Z, I'm going to lose.
Thus
if I'm
my
on the
question to the good senator. For years, and I was surprised she said she'd never heard of it. It's been talked about in Montgomery County for years. Now, granted, I have been around much longer than the quite lovely young Senator Kagan has. But it has been talked about for years to have non-alphabetical listing. And I think it's a very good idea, this being a case in point.
Yeah.
Well, but even if that were the case and it was non-alphabetical, whoever's on the second page is still getting a short end of the stick.
It is still, but
so it wouldn't be based on their name; it would be based on their luck.
Well, you could rotate them.
Ballot rotation.
You could rotate it. A, then the next ballot.
I think the program
next
for
precinct,
doing that
B
is
is the first. I don't know.
It's not that easy.
Kevin,
Kevin, was it your understanding that ES&S never came up with the actual coded solution, or they did and claimed it was outside the contract, demanded payment, and the state said no?
Oh, that's a good.
I believe that it was outside the contract, and they said that they would have to, there would be another charge for it.
And the state didn't agree with that and wasn't.
And I think now the timing of it has gotten to be the point that they couldn't get it through the certification process before to get it in place for 2018.
Margaret, it sounds...
The change to double the number of candidates that would appear on the screen would be doable for a cost. Changes to the navigation is the part that was not completed.
I think the sense of the board is, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like a good idea if it works. It's kind of a generic statement.
I would say the same thing differently. I would say that I would only do it if it works.
Right.
Okay,
I think that the navigation issue is a serious one, hasn't been fixed, I think that we also heard, I don't remember which month, I lose track as to which month was which, but we had one month where we were first told about the possibility of paper ballots being needed again. And I think we were all in shock that particular month. And then our staff came back either the month after that or the month after that with a number of suggestions for how to make sure that the ballots were much more likely, the correct ballots to be handed out. And I believe you even had additional organizing tools for the for the polling places. And I thought that you'd done a good job of making lemonade out of the lemon.
Yeah.
You know, and doing our best to try and make sure the ballots are handed out correctly, but also taking into consideration this issue. I'm very concerned over the idea of our adopting, knowing about the navigation problem, our adopting that as our method of voting, and I'm also very concerned. Yes, I think our outreach is great, but I'm not sure even if we did amazing outreach from now until the election, what percentage of the voters are we going to get to? It will not be 100.
Okay, so I'm not going to have the staff do any research with other states or the District of Columbia. What I will do is work with Kevin to come up with a statement representing what I am feeling as a sense of the board, that you're really not, we'll use the ballot marking device as designed as the ADA voting device, and that's the end of the story. Is that?
Well,
Yeah.
Margaret, I would say I'm not sure I've made up my mind. I mean,
Okay.
This is a bit of a dilemma and a close call. I'm not sure what the right answer is. I mean, right now, what happens if there is an error in the ballot style? How does that process, how does it get resolved? The voter eventually discovers it and then has to go back?
No, we'll find it in our auditing.
It's too late now.
So it's too late.
It's
So
too late. They lose their vote.
ballot would be at least partly rejected because they voted for the wrong office, right?
Unless they notice it when they're still at the polling place, if they notice the person they wanted to vote for is not on the ballot, then they would be able to go back and get the correct ballot right there.
If they know that their legislator is Senator Kagan and it's not Senator King, or if they know there are 3 delegates, or if they know who their county council person is, it's Council Member Rice, and it's not Council Member Berliner. But if they don't know,
Then what happens?
then they will vote whatever ballot was given to them.
It's a vote for a candidate they're otherwise not eligible to vote.
But let's say someone
And so it gets,
It'll be scanned.
gets the wrong paper ballot,
No.
and they vote, but it was the wrong ballot. And some of the people don't represent them, so that wouldn't count. But would they still count for governor, U.S. Senate?
They'll count.
No,
The whole ticket is counted.
You won't be able to tell because we don't match the voter with their vote.
But then it's rejected.
No.
oh no, so you actually have someone whose vote is counted for an office for which they were not eligible to vote.
Correct.
Oh. I thought you said the audit would take it out.
No.
The audit would find it.
We find the election mistakes.
So you just find when you do the audit, there are X number of people who voted for a particular race, and there
So
were
it's
X
a
number of people
number,
who were
it's not the
eligible to vote.
individual person.
That's correct.
So would an audit find the issue with the machine if people, as a result of the navigation issue, are confused about their vote, don't get to finish voting, vote for 3 instead of 4?
We wouldn't see that.
So there's no way
We would not be able to see that.
Where you see it most acutely is in the consolidated polling places. So it can happen in early voting, for somebody to get the wrong ballot style. We've got, we're on top of that, where if you have a consolidated polling place, especially where you have those teeny tiny little precincts that are combined with a larger polling place, they might only have 25 ballots there for one precinct because there may be a very small number of voters in that precinct for that ballot style, and all the rest of the ballots for voters in that polling place may be in the much larger stack. If those 25 ballots get grabbed and handed out to the wrong people, then that's where you end up with results that look like you've got 300% and 400% turnout because all of the ballot styles for that one precinct were handed out to the wrong people. That's the worst case scenario.
Do we send out a sample ballot for the primary? I mean, for the early voting and whatever. I know this is whistling in the wind, and I understand that, but I need to say, could we very prominently, and I'd love it if the league would do it too, very prominently put on the front, know your precinct when you walk in?
I think we do encourage people to bring their sample ballot so that they use it as a referral. We can do, we're working on various designs right now. One of them was David's suggestion that we make sure that people verify that they're a registered voter in case of, the Russians come again. And we're certainly looking at the sample ballot design also to ensure the correct, that people bring the correct ballot.
Bring it up in people's brain.
But it's not something, it's just not an intuitive process.
What's the time frame on when we have to?
Late October is the deadline.
Can we get input from the elected officials and candidates who?
Well, they have their hearing before the board this September, this end of the month. Right,
on the same day that Yom Kippur starts, on Friday afternoon in Annapolis. And I'm asking whether we might benefit from hearing from our own local people who are definitely going to be affected either way. Because Alex is right. This is an issue of, kind of pick your poison. We have the possibility of errors in one direction. We have the possibility of errors in the other direction. But I'm just thinking that it might make sense for us to get some additional input before we make a decision.
Okay, we can do that.
Margaret, from your audit, do you have a sense of how often the wrong ballot style was handed out?
We had, Janet, did we have 2 precincts in which we had
it was over 100%.
Yeah. And again, it's these little precincts.
Well, but that doesn't answer the question as to how often it happens.
That's how we can most readily prove it. How can I prove if, 2 of you walk up to an election judge in an early voting site and, David gets Jim's ballot and Jim gets David's ballot. That's,
so there are these
the
situations where you
numbers
just
don't
won't
clearly, the procedures, are what we're focused on in that kind of a situation. If we have a precinct where we actually have more than 100% turnout, then it's quite obvious what happened to cause that, was the wrong ballot style being handed out to more voters than it should have been.
And we can go back and look at, if the precinct had 115%, I can look at the poll book record and see how many people were supposed to vote in the other precinct that didn't. It'll tell me 80 people registered to vote in precinct 05, but I only had 10 because everybody else was giving the wrong ballot.
You're saying that this is like for a consolidated precinct.
Yes.
Jim and I vote in the same place. We live in different precincts, but we all get the same ballot because somebody makes a mistake.
And the only way we can tell is to pull the record and see what the poll book said they should have voted. And I can not say which one got the wrong ballot, but I can say how many got the
How does one audit the results on the express vote?
One thing I want to say about the express vote, if you do undervote, it's going to tell you undervoted. It's going to show you every contest you did not vote all the required votes in. And it says, do you really want to submit it this way, or do you want to go back and select that contest?
Yeah, but it doesn't tell you if the voter didn't go to pages 2 through 4.
It will not allow you.
No, they're mandated that they have to
It will
go
not
to the
allow
next
you
page. That's what
to
costs
vote without.
Yeah, you
wanting
have
see
to go to every
candidate.
page, every screen of a contest. You
Okay.
have to go to each screen, just
That
like
was
the
the
chat
change we
screen.
put
Okay.
in
To
because of the
complete,
rock vote.
yeah.
Yeah, that was the Maryland repair
Okay.
that made the convoluted navigation.
Okay.
To answer your question, David, there's no vote record stored on the ballot marking device. It just marks the ballot. So the paper ballot itself, once it's inserted into the scanner, is what's available.
And what does the paper ballot say on it?
The names of the candidates voted for.
Just to read the ballot.
Yeah.
So it
would
has
John
offices
McCain.
and so it's a list of offices and names.
Yes.
Yes.
And how do we determine if it was marked correctly?
The voter does.
The voter
does.
printed it and presumably looked at it before they put it in the scanner.
What's the size of the print?
It's really
Well, there is screen verification before you hit print. You do screen verify.
Yeah, there's a summary screen that you go through and you confirm that these are your choices, just like you did with the touch screen. So how does the board want, so the board wants to
get input from local candidates.
get input, so that means you want us to attend the September board meeting with the state board and
What's
hear
the
what
date of that?
It's normally the last Wednesday of the month. I don't know what the date
When's
is.
our next meeting?
That's Monday.
And you can solicit candidates' opinions. And
27th, September 27th, is
is
that
that the
right?
last Wednesday?
Yeah.
Thursday.
Is it Thursday?
If you're talking about October or September?
September 28th.
It's not
Next
scheduled on
week.
the 28th. It's scheduled on the 29th.
They changed it after the meeting.
Right. It's scheduled at 2 o'clock on the 29th,
Okay.
Which is Friday?
which is
Thursday.
Friday.
Friday, that's
Which
what I
is
thought.
Friday. And I can tell you that if anybody who belongs to my religion goes to this hearing, it'll be challenging to get to the end of the hearing and then get home in time for the holiday. Especially if you're going from Annapolis to here, so.
Is it in the state board office?
Yeah.
There's not much room there, but that's where it is?
Yes.
David, would you pass it around?
Yes, absolutely.
Please.
Okay,
Well, it
so
works for
we
me,
should
but I have
attend
no
the
glasses.
state board meeting. I will have staff do some research from other states that have this system as it currently exists with the current negotiation. Navigation. I'm into negotiating here.
Yeah.
And we will put together a statement for the next board meeting.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the next topic, the absentee mail ballot process. Staff was informed in late August that there were no vendors submitting a response to the State Board of Elections request for proposal for an automated ballot system. They did 2 RFPs and neither one was successful. This decision will have a fiscal impact on the Board of Elections for both elections in 2018. Staff believes that with the expected turnout in the primary, that the mailing of the absentee ballots can and will be performed internally here at the office. Staff plans to meet with the State Board of Elections staff to discuss the ability to enter into a potential contract following all the procurement procedures of Montgomery County with a private vendor for the general election. Managing 14,000 to 21,000 absentee requests manually would be very challenging under the current, with the current expectations that are in place with a lot of our voters. This process is much more complex than it was the last time we handled it in-house in 2010.
Staff also needs to confirm that entering into a contract with the vendor will have the support of the state board in light of all the newest security requirements that continue to take place. The state board did inform me that they do have an RFP out related to the email delivery of the ballot. The state notified me today that they would like to meet with us to discuss this matter. The thing is that to enter into developing an RFP would require for our department and for the county to commit to probably doing the contract for this year, and then if the state, it's really important for us to find out what the state's plans are going to be. If they're going to come back in 2020 and do a contract for absentee voting by mail and then pull the rug out from under us after we've already committed to a contract for the 2018 and then part of 2020, or if we purchase equipment. So one of the options that we are there's just a whole array of different ways we can handle this. One of the pieces is what Johnson County, Kansas did, and that's purchase a ballot-on-demand printer. This is an expensive piece of equipment, and the equipment that goes with it in terms of putting the mail piece together so that it has the intelligent barcode, so that the voters have come to expect the ability to track the mail. So they mail their absentee ballot back. They expect us to be able to tell them where exactly it is in the process. That's what Runbeck did provide. That's not going to be available. And that's something that the voters been receiving as a service since the 2012 election. So we right now are asking a lot of questions, and we are looking at the different models there are in the private sector that we could possibly tap into. Additionally, on the budget side, we need to get OMB to either say yay or nay, because if we enter into a contract, we have to be able to pay for it. This was not, this going back to the old days of hand stuffing envelopes was not part of any planning. We certainly never in a million years thought that no one would bid on a budget on this type of balloting system. It was a big shock. And I'm not even sure every election director knows. I called the state board and found out about it inadvertently because I was asking questions.
And they knew about it.
And they knew about it.
When you say automated mail ballot system, you mean to contract out the physical stuffing of the envelopes?
Well, it's more than just that, but yeah. So that's one of the things that we are currently in the process of exploring. Yes.
Does this mean that the cost is being shifted from the state to the county without the state contributing?
Yes.
That's okay.
Yeah, more or less.
And what happened to the 50-50 split that supposedly we do for elections?
You know, that is one of the questions. That is, one of many. I mean, Allison and I, and separately Margie and I, and Jessica all sat down. I typed up just a series of kind of what our working thoughts are. And like I said, I was notified today, a couple of hours right before this meeting, that they have a date that they're available to discuss these matters with us. So, but I have the utmost confidence in Jessica and Bobby and Michelle to be able to handle what will happen for the primary. I'm keeping in mind that probably, again, 30 to 40% of the ballots that we're going to send out are going to be those wonderful email delivery ballots. But hopefully this other RFP is going to make the workload a little less.
What was the percentage of email delivery ballots
What
last
was
time?
it, 30? I would have to look that number up for you. But it was a significant number. Do you remember?
I think it varied. I think it was about 35% or so.
Good. That's a large,
That's a lot.
large percentage.
So, yeah, it felt like it too.
Yeah.
So I think we had
So-
about 20,000 returned in the general out of 55,000 or so.
So, anyway, that's one of the things, and we will report back to you in October, you know, what we have found out. There's a whole piece of this that's going to have to occur on the county level in terms of the Office of Management and Budget, the procurement process, and so there's much more to tell about this particular topic.
Thank
All
you.
right, the biennial meeting is going to be held Monday, October 23rd, begins at 9 a.m. It'll be at the Doubletree Hotel in Annapolis. The meeting is mandatory for all board members, board attorney, director, and deputy director.
We have one day meeting.
A one-day
You
meeting,
can-
yes.
In the morning and come back at night time.
And
Good.
the agenda, okay, then I provided to you in the email proposed legislation by Delegate Lukey. Jim wants that to be discussed next month. Do you want us to send an invite to Delegate Lukey to explain this legislation?
We can.
Okay.
We can.
Where is it?
Demonstrate now.
And that's all I have. Kevin?
Let me start with the Judicial Watch lawsuit. As you know, Judicial Watch has sued the State Board of Elections and Montgomery County Board of Elections regarding the state's decision not to produce a list of registered voters in Montgomery County. The state's taking the position that there's a state statute that you have to be a registered voter, which obviously Judicial Watch could never satisfy. So that's the position the state has taken, in addition to the language of the National Voter Registration Act, that the materials requested are not necessarily covered by the act itself. The state has filed a motion to dismiss or for summary judgment, which they did Thursday or Friday, and we have filed a motion to dismiss. Our motion really doesn't weigh in on the merits, but takes the position that the request for materials was sent to the state board chair, and although the Montgomery County Board of Elections was copied on the letter itself doesn't really request any information from the board. So under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 8, the local board is not a proper party to the case. We have filed that Wednesday. We filed it, Friday. I know plaintiffs' counsel already indicated they're going to need an extension because they have briefing going on in a case in another circuit. So I think their brief is due the middle to the third week of October. Then we'll file a reply brief, and then Judge Hollander will decide whether she wants to have a hearing. In federal court, they don't have to have a hearing, so it's more likely than not she'll simply rule on the merits of the motions. So that's where we are in Judicial Watch. Yes, Dave?
Can we get copies of the
Yes.
state's and your brief?
And it's in dictation. Just Brenda hasn't gotten it to you yet, but she will email you final copies of both pleadings that were filed.
The bottom line is Judicial Watch never requested of us any documents.
Correct. And I did request that they disagree to a voluntary dismissal, and they declined my request. So we had to file a motion on that point. Okay. So that's that. In addition, just as a reminder, a letter was circulated, which you all reviewed and approved, regarding the change in COMAR regarding provisional ballots and absentee ballots. As you know, currently, if a voter returns a provisional ballot and an absentee ballot, both are rejected. The board submitted a letter saying we believe that the proper process is that we count one or the other, which is what we do for absentee ballots. If you submit more than one absentee ballot, the latest in time gets counted and the other gets rejected. And that has been submitted to the board. The comment period has closed, but I don't think the state board has acted upon that issue because they did not have a meeting last month. So hopefully we'll get some more information at this month's meeting.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Oh, Kevin, I have a question about Public Interest Legal Foundation's FOIA request. Do you know where that stands right now?
It's been responded to. Alex, did I not send that to you?
I know I have the request here, but I didn't know we had responded to it yet.
Let me double check and get back to you.
Thank you.
Could I get a copy of that too?
Sure.
Well, you sent it to everybody, right?
I will send it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr.?
Nothing else.
Okay,
Old business.
now, under old business, we have 4 early voting sites that were suggested, and we have some construction going on at the Potomac Community Center, which we wish to explain to the board. So,
That's the one she doesn't want it. Separation of churches and buildings. That's okay. Because they have a place we use as a photo of the church on Fort Road and Riverville, remember? That's a church, yeah. We use them for road.
We did have one.
Yeah, it's be super.
Well, good afternoon. We have, as Ms. Jurgensen mentioned, 4 additional comments that we'd like to share with you. Some of the original early voting sites were reviewed by the public, and suggestions came in after the fact. So we'd like to share those with you.
These are comments from the public.
These are suggestions from the public regarding other early voting centers.
Are these the letters, we have this pile of letters here, is that included?
Yes, is part of it, yes. Clara Barton was one of the community suggestions, and as you'll see, it's on MacArthur Boulevard. This is an area that you're accustomed to seeing. We presently use Clara Barton as a polling place. This shows the public transit within a half block of the center. There are 2 stops that are available off of the public transit. This is the voter entrance. Our early voting campaigning would happen along the sidewalks. This is the room that would be available to us. Parking is limited. This is the front parking. There are 2 handicap spaces and 4 general spaces. This is the end of the building, the north side of the building, where there is 18 spaces, and I'll mention right now that these 18 spaces would be shared staffing from the rec center, as well as there is a daycare center in this part of the building, so staffing would be using a lot of the spaces.
And our judges would have to park, and then the public would have to park.
Correct.
The parking is very bad. I know that center.
Chris, what's the nearest early voting site to that we have now?
Potomac.
Potomac.
Potomac, yeah.
Yeah, Potomac and Jane Lawton would be the alternatives. This is a basketball court that's on the rear of the building. Now, when the staff has an event where there's multiple spaces needed for parking, they have the option to use this court, this basketball court, as temporary parking. But I'm going to go back if you will allow me. Excuse me. Here is a gate that allows people from this area to pull around with their car to the back of the building. But when they do that, if you'll notice, there's a playground right there. The children from the child care center have to cross over this lane to get to the playground. creates a hazard. So the challenges we find there: inadequate parking,
Very bad place.
unsafe access to the rear parking if it was available to us, and then limited campaign area.
But you say we've used it.
We
As
use
a polling
it
place.
for
We use them for
election
polling
day,
places.
not
Not
for
early
early
voting.
And did
voting.
it work out all right?
We have not received
Not you
any
normally,
issues.
Yeah.
you cover it,
I
right?
cover it. It's okay during one day parking, but because it's a neighborhood, they walk. Not that many.
Well, it's only
but
one precinct.
for early voting, they're going to be different.
10 days. Yeah.
Margaret Schweinhut Senior Center has been suggested as a Wheaton alternative, or a potential location for the Wheaton Early Voting Center. Again, the Senior Center is used on election day as a polling place, a precinct polling place, and it is ADA compliant and the parking is sufficient. Public transit, we have ride-on that pulls right into the door of the center. This is the entrance, and our campaigning would happen in these areas. Again, we have a sufficient space for the room. And our challenge here is, it is a Silver Spring address, and it is in the Forest Glen neighborhood, and it's being recommended as a Wheaton location. St. Catherine Labouré Catholic Church has been suggested as a Wheaton location for early voting. This is the aerial. They have an event room that is called the Claridge Room. The entrance is there. It is off of Veers Mill Road in Claridge in Wheaton.
This is a old school that is not in use any longer.
Do we have to pay?
Yes, probably.
There,
How much?
more than likely, yes,
don't
there
know.
will be a fee.
And
The
it's actually
school-
separated from the church.
Yeah, it is
It's
separate
separated
building.
from the church.
Correct. This is the worship center. This is the church. And this is the area where the parochial school was. And the building where we would be voting is connected to the school. The school is no longer used.
So our voting site, it's an empty building?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
This classroom space in here, and it's no longer serves as a school.
So they don't use it at all? For
They rent
any
it out.
purpose?
I have not gone into detail. I could find that information out for you, but it's my inclination that maybe they use it for Christian education, but it's not a school used as a school building.
Right.
Public transit, you would have access off of Veers Mill. There's stops, as well as Claridge. There's stops. Left this blank. We have not had opportunity to see the room. We have spoken with the pastor. The pastor is aware of early voting, feels that the Claridge room has the space that would be needed. We're waiting a decision from the church council, and the challenge, well, first we'll go over the parking. We have handicap parking here, we have handicap parking here, and more than likely temporary parking for handicap would be placed there. There are 300 spaces. Our challenge for St. Catherine is there is a potential scheduling conflict. There's an existing reservation that the pastor is trying to renegotiate. We should hear later on this week or next regarding the reservation. Wheaton Arts Building was also suggested as a Wheaton location.
Was this the site presented to us at the meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
I went by and looked at that.
But before we do that, can I ask a question about the church? Do we know what the parking situation would be? We have early voting on Sunday.
Correct.
we would have to bring in traffic people to assist. Well, first of all, you are correct. There is masses on Saturday and Sunday.
Mhm.
So, but Saturday nights it's very, very slow at all of our early voting centers. But we would have to bring in someone to help negotiate traffic between the individuals that are attending church service versus those individuals that are going to vote. So we would have to work something out with the parish. Likewise on Sunday, again, Sunday morning, generally slower. It gets busier when you get to about 11 o'clock noon. I don't have the St. Catherine's Church schedule, but we would have the traffic folks help us manage traffic between the day of Sunday Mass, if it which it probably would overlap at some point.
They do have earlier masses on Sunday, but Ms. Jurgensen is correct. We would have an overlap at the 10 o'clock time.
On Sunday, we'd have an overlap at 11:30 a.m. too.
So as we mentioned, we have the scheduling conflict. The Wheaton Arts Building is, yes, suggested as an alternative for a temporary location for Wheaton. And Mr. Epstein was the gentleman that came and spoke to us at the last meeting regarding the space.
Right.
It is part of the Westfield Mall complex. It's in the southern corner. The building is right here. It used to be a cosmetology school. There is handicap parking on this level, as well as there is a ramp right there.
Where's the theater?
The theater is here.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And the construction that's showing on that picture is not currently construction, is it?
Construction here.
Yes. I went by there and it was nothing like that.
And that's open. There's
Yeah.
some construction. This building here, and there's parking down here. There is some construction going on there, and I believe it's improvement to the parking lot. That there is a walkway here. It's a stair situation where people from this area
Can park there too.
could come down this stairway and be on this level.
David, that's that's construction stuff, and I think that might well be gone.
Yeah, I don't think it's there.
It's not there now.
It's not there. Well, I don't remember it when I went by.
She was inside. Oh.
We have two stops that are relatively close for the public transit.
Well, there's actually the Wheaton Metro is very close by as well.
Correct. It's across Veers Mill from there. This is another look at the entrance, and you can see the ramp. This is the room itself. It's 920 square feet. The photo is looking out towards the entrance. The next photo is looking from the entrance to the back of the room. The next photo is somewhat around the corner from the entrance, and it's 920 square feet.
This is 1/3 of the size of most of our polling places or early voting
Well,
sites.
but it has
But then it has
other
this
space.
additional space which we would use for queuing up voters.
We could use this space. When you take and you total the space, we've got 1,600, 1,700, but that's about half, as Ms. Jurgens says, on what we normally use.
But isn't there no electioneering at that site?
That is the problem.
The mall doesn't allow candidates to campaign.
Well, not only will the mall not allow the candidates, but they won't even consider our request until April and May of next year.
And we have the challenges listed here. They will not enter into any kind of negotiation with us until April, May of 2018, and that is only for the June election. That's not addressing the November election. During those negotiations, there's no campaigning allowed. The square footage is marginal, as we discussed, and we would have extensive improvement work to have the polling area acceptable for voting.
I mean, why we are looking at this? I don't think it's
Well, it was just
a good place to have. I'm against it. Go ahead.
And then we have some additional information that we wanted to share with you on Potomac Recreation Center. The new information is regarding environmental projects. Potomac Rec Center has been chosen as a low-impact development project. This is Montgomery County watershed project. The green that you are seeing here is the 10 acres that encompasses the improvement project. The project's scheduled for November 2017, and the target completion would be October 2018. Ms. Jurgensen and I met with the project manager and the contractors to discuss staging and target dates, and they're firm on their dates. They really feel that they won't be finished much before October.
Is this going to involve something with the building or the grounds around
it? The grounds around it. The green, it's improvement on the property around the building for runoff purposes.
So it's landscaping kind of thing?
No, it's more than landscaping. Go to the next one.
This is an aerial that you're accustomed to seeing when we review the site. The next aerial that we're going to show you is we have taken and sectioned off the different portions of the parking area. Say, for instance, blue. The project manager and the contractors are explaining to us that this project is done in stages. So different parts of the green area that you saw earlier will be staged and done at different times during the construction period. So there's the potential that blue could be the first construction area that they take on, and they take on about 12 spaces at a time. So that if we have about 100 parking spaces out there. So at any given time we'll be missing probably 12, 15 spaces. As well as this has been overflow parking. It's a gravel area. That gravel area will be the staging area for the contractor during the project.
Does the 100 spaces include the gravel area?
No.
And do you have any information about the timing of the different phases?
No, they have not given us a schedule as to when, and this is hypothetical on our part. We were trying to demonstrate how the contractor intends on staging out the project.
Oh, so you're saying...
So the intent of the contractor is that there's a lot of work that will be done on the green area where the grass is and around the tennis courts and on the tennis court and on the basketball court. But when we spoke with them and we were discussing the June election, we asked that when they are working in the parking lot, first of all, the construction area where the contractors stay, that's gone. That's where they're going to have their heavy equipment. That's where they're, the gentlemen and ladies that work on this project, that's where they will be parking. What the contractor has said is that we've already notified them of the dates of the election. What they will do is they will only take out or work on 12 to 15 parking spaces during the period of time when we're doing early voting. So, Chris, let's go to the blue. So let's say the top half represents 12 parking spaces. So they would still have the other half of that blue spot available. Now, if you want a more detailed presentation by the contractor and the department, we can bring them in to have them explain this process, to the contractual process. I chose not to have them come in
for this meeting, but we certainly can bring them in for October.
Margaret,
But
what was your-
basically, you're going to be losing the contracting area and an average of 12 to 15 parking spaces during the primary election. And it is their intent, and of course, we could have, 25 inches of snow on the ground for 5 months, but their intent is to have everything at least available, everything to be done by October, and the full parking restored to us for the November 6th election.
But the contracting staging area is another 20 or more parking spaces
Probably
itself.
with contract, yeah, but it's a gravel parking lot.
Right,
That's
but I
what I'm
mean,
correct.
when we've had big crowds in the past,
Yes.
I'm sure that people were using it, and we had a lot of concern about parking at this location.
Yes, we did.
And like Margaret said, if there's any bad weather this winter, that would delay the
Yeah.
project and potentially be an issue in November
Parking
as well.
will be a big problem.
Parking was a problem already.
Before we had problems
Yes.
with the parking,
Yeah.
yes.
But people liked it though, It was.
Yeah, it's a very
fun.
popular spot.
Yeah,
Which is why there's a parking problem.
Wasn't it the second most used?
It was in the primary. That's right.
Primary.
it was one of the busy.
One thing that we did,
But I thought-
don't
I'm
know
sorry.
if this will give you a better
Let's see.
picture or concept. On the website, different photos were provided to the public to show what areas are going to be worked upon. This being the tennis courts, parking lots, this sports arena is going to be redone, more parking lots, the entrances, and areas such as this. So not only will they be working on the parking lots themselves, the areas around will also be staged through the
The
construction.
full 10 acres will be.
But I thought the problem with Potomac parking was we were conflicting with a lot of their events,
Yeah.
like senior citizen events.
Well,
Child care
that
center
certainly
and-
contributed
yeah.
to the
Yeah.
problem.
Are those events scheduled for 2018?
The only thing that has not been delayed, the senior nutrition site will continue to go on. The kids' camps will be delayed. But the rest of the programs, they do not plan on changing those out.
Didn't we have police parking people across the street?
Yes,
Yes.
right, yeah.
We will have to have police back there.
What's
Yeah.
across the street?
Illegal parking.
Neighboring, people
Yeah.
park on the
There's-
street, people
Mhm.
park in the
It's
residential
residential
area.
across the street.
And we were directing people
Please.
there? The police
Well,
officer?
the other
Directing
side.
the park on the easements off
Yeah.
the road there.
And the street behind it.
And that,
It's going to be a problem. Construction, you never know. You may find a big hole. When they do construction.
Well, it also sounds like it depends on where they are in their staging as to how many parking spaces were out.
Right.
If they're on a stage where they're mostly looking at the tennis courts, that's not as big an issue as if they're
Yeah, that I'm
in
saying.
the, in the, in the
We don't-
parking.
With them
Construction,
about
you
their
never know.
schedules when they're staging things.
I'm sorry?
Whether or not we could work with them on their schedule of when they're staging things.
Although, as Margaret pointed out, that's affected by the
Be-
weather. I mean,
yeah.
so, they may not, they can have the best of intentions and not
Yeah.
know at this point.
Okay. Good job.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you.
Are there
Thank you.
any of these locations that Chris showed you today that you want to just say no to, or do you want all of these sites available for purposes of discussion on this coming Saturday?
I already said to one of them, the parking. Which one was it? Do you remember, Lisa? Which one was
Clara
it?
Barton?
It doesn't hurt to have people.
Clara Barton.
The Beaton?
Oh,
Remember
Clara
the-
Barton?
No,
Clara
the
Barton.
Beaton. No, the Clara Barton is parking is available on side street. You can go and park on the street, but it's not like one parking aside.
But-
Just park along the street. It's a residential area. You can park there. But one of them, which the parking was very bad.
Clara Barton?
You kept saying
Clara Barton is the one. Clara Barton had 18 and 4, and that includes our staff.
Oh,
And that
Beaton
includes
Art Center.
No.
Beaton Art
That's
Center.
at
No, that's at the mall.
Arts.
That's not parking.
Clara Barton was
that's,
the...
yeah.
Clara Barton
Wheaton Arts Center
parking
wasn't a parking issue.
No.
Clara Barton was the parking issue. The Wheaton,
For an early voting
Art
site, you
Mall
kept saying that it was an issue for early voting.
Is, the Wheaton Art, that issue was.
Electioneering.
It's
No,
small.
that's the one.
Electioneering, no contract, and the sizes have to stay.
Yeah, that's the one I said.
Yeah.
It's really should not, we shouldn't consider it.
Okay.
Clara Barton, you can work around it because it is parking on the street.
Okay, so.
I disagree with that assessment, but obviously it's a matter of opinion. I mean, I think given the number of parking spaces, to rely on street parking for early voting, when there's only a total of 20-something spaces available, including for our staff, I think by definition that's beyond what we can do.
You would have at least 15 to 16 election judges there.
Yeah.
And you've just knocked out all the parking.
So there's really no parking.
And the nursery school staff, and then
I drive there and go check.
So what are we saying?
So I need a
I see
motion
for
to
sure,
remove these.
for sure the Wheaton Art Center is out, in my view. Because there's so much
Is that a
negative
motion?
thing about it.
if we don't do that, somebody needs to write a letter to Mr. Erskine. Have given the, just
So, Nahid, you're making a motion not to provide to the public the following sites. Which one?
Wheaton Art Center.
Hasn't that site already been on the website or not?
Is it up? No.
No?
No, we didn't put anything up until you guys signed up.
These that you're reviewing today have not been put on the website.
Are there-
Other than Potomac with the construction has been up, but the others.
Are there any other sites
So
that,
so the Potomac construction is on our website?
No, the site itself is on there, but the construction is not.
is there any other site that someone feels should not be provided at the public meeting, aside from the Art Center?
I would say Clara Barton.
If we won't have Potomac Community Center due to construction, then Clara Barton is the choice.
Well, but you also have the
Yeah,
Day-6
North-
Center in North Potomac.
North Potomac is the Dasic Center.
And it's
Huge.
I was gonna say it has lots
I
of
know,
parking.
but that's too far for this group. These are south, that's north.
Well,
I
this-
know the area very well.
This
all
this
the-
list is just for consideration by the public.
Yeah,
Right,
Yeah,
for Saturday.
right.
Can I make a suggestion
I mean, we
about
can
that?
have that one as a,
Is there any harm done in having them all available for the public and with all, I mean, they all have pluses and minuses.
Saturday, okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't see any problem with that.
Okay. All right, then, Jim, aside, I was not able to attend the meeting with the public school system, but Jim reported to everyone that we expected to hear a response from the public school system administration by October 15th with regards to those facilities.
Correct.
And that was your meeting with them, Jim?
Correct. Yeah, just for the public record, when we learned from the school system that right after school closed this year, they were going to do a lot of air conditioning work and construction at school sites, we were faced with an alarming number of voters we had to move to different polling places. The number was about 63,000 voters that because of school construction, we would have to move to new precincts. This board felt very strongly about that concern, and we've reached out to the board. Right now, as I talk, currently, we would have to move approximately 46,000-ish voters from one polling place to another because of school construction. The school superintendent is very sympathetic to our situation. Mike Subin has been very instrumental in talking to the county government, and by October 15th, the school superintendent is going to get back to us. He's personally involved with his attempts to reduce the 46,000 to hopefully a much less number that we have to move. So that's where we are. It's a very serious situation that the superintendent is personally. Mike, did you want to add anything on that?
Two things. One, I spoke to Dave Dice, and I don't know if he and Margaret have gotten to talk yet, but there were 4 or 5 HVAC projects.
Say who he was for the record,
The Director of General Services. And Dave has said that he, working with Margaret, will be able to provide fans and space air conditioners. So I think those 4 or 5 will be able to come off the list as soon as Margaret and David.
Does that meet the state's requirements?
David Dice and I did speak. Fans are not on the table. Paper ballots and fans.
Okay.
When I
I know. And David didn't think about it either. The air conditioning, yes. And what's going to happen is once the board makes their minds with regards to all these polling places, we're going to sit down in January and map out a plan. You are correct. I did talk to David.
Well, for the second factor, January may be a better time to start talking. After Hurricane Katrina, price of construction materials and labor went sky high. Katrina was a little puppy dog compared to both Harvey and Irma. They're going to have, even though OMB doesn't think so, they're going to have significant impacts on construction prices. Lumber prices, wallboard, concrete, glass, structural steel, and then gas prices have gone up. That's going to affect transportation costs for all of that. So I think watch the CIP this year, because there are probably going to be some significant impacts, and projects for the school system and the county are going to have to be pushed out, because the spending affordability for capital improvements is going to stay the same. That's not going to go up just because costs go up.
Do you know when we would know that?
Well, as soon as the waters recede, and only God can tell you that.
Right.
And they start to go in and assess damage and start to be able to.
No, I mean in terms of the effect on the CIP. I gather what you're saying is
it won't be. I mean, right now they're still in recovery mode.
Right.
And that's those costs for everybody. It's the last thing they're worried about. They're looking at saving lives, and until that's completed, unless the futures prices start to go up.
Margaret, when do we have to tell a voter that we're moving your polling place?
Well, really and truly, we need to do it no later than December.
Then summer?
December.
And what is your time ahead of that you have to get ready to do that? That takes you stages.
This December.
This December. The thing is that we originally scheduled all polling place changes. It is a very complex process to do a polling place change because we have to go in and literally change many pieces to the Maryland voter registration database, as well as the GIS interface that has to be done with regards to streets. There's a lot of hand. We have to manually put in certain types of streets. It's complicated. So our intent was to have the board make its polling place decisions in November, so that during the month of December we could do the work. So also have the legal description for 1368 ready for you to sign off on in November. Work on all of the technical pieces that are required for the changes, and then begin the process of mailing out, which we have to do, all the polling place notification changes to those individuals that would be impacted. So that would occur during the months of January going into February. And then because of the magnitude of some of these changes, if it happens, the staff is going to bring forward to the board to do an additional mailing to notify people of polling place changes. but we're not ready to present that at this time.
Yeah, I think the timing's going to be a big problem because the CE doesn't release his recommended CIP until January 15th. I guess they'll start looking at it in earnest now, but anything would be anticipatory, and I wouldn't expect the school system to admit that there's going to be a problem, given their past history. So they'll probably end up submitting their full CIP, and then the answers to all that won't be available until the end of May.
But we need to have all the polling places in place
That's what
for
I'm saying,
the
Margaret.
candidates.
The timing is going to be the real issue here.
And we're looking
the
at
question
legal
of
deadline.
when does realism start to kick in?
Yeah.
But meaning you're thinking, Mike, that this might cause a delay, the uptick in construction prices in some of these projects.
Yeah, but we won't know that officially until the end of May. That's the problem.
This is a big problem. To move 46,000 people to new polling places is going to be an outrage to a lot of voters.
So we have to get everything else in place.
I can see people
Right
claiming
away.
voter suppression, voter manipulation. In today's political climate, moving almost 50,000 voters is not good. Not good.
Well, we will follow all of the legal, well, we have to follow all the
No, I
legal
know.
mandates, and we have, like I said, we are going to suggest a separate mailing to these individuals to improve the probability that they'll get the message where their polling place is. But quite honestly, if they were to go to, which is one of the schools? Throw me the name of a school that's under construction, that's on that list.
Potomac
Kensington
Elementary.
Parking. Okay, that one, there's an addition going on. So if you went, if you live in that neighborhood, if you have kids going to school, you're going to see part of the wall missing at the
No, I know.
school. So, they're going to see that there's construction going on. HVAC stuff, that's a little harder to see because you don't see on top of a roof.
How many people are going to go to vote, and there's going to be a sign, no voting, and they're going to go to work?
Well, there's not going to be a sign that says no vote.
Well, you know what I'm saying. Go to so-and-so. And
But
it's a problem.
we will be doing mailings to the voters.
Margaret,
They will have
the
a
issue-
sample. I understand, believe me, I
But
understand.
the additions, you don't have to breach that wall to connect until the last piece. So they can schedule that work around that and just move in instead of out. The other thing that they can do that politically is a hot potato would say, okay, we already know there are going to be increases, so we can take the modernizations and kick them out 6 months, which will put it outside. It just delays a number of things down
School stuff.
stream.
That's
But we've done that before. In fact, it may have been right after Katrina, when everybody was putting out their RFPs in the spring for the next year's construction. The cost just skyrocketed. So we said, you know what? Hold off. We'll put those bids out in December, and they came down appreciably.
But Mike, as we talk, we're moving 46,000 voters. As we talk.
As of now, because we haven't gotten anything back, and it won't till October 15th.
Jim, I think
No, the staff has been terrific. I'm not saying. I'm just very concerned in today's political climate. Candidates are going to be upset. I lost an election because my home district was moved to another precinct. Candidates are going to be upset. The political party is going to be upset. The press is going to come after what's going on. The governor's up for re-election. You got a Republican majority board moving 50,000 voters. There's going to be criticism, political criticism. I'm very, very concerned about this. That's a tremendous amount of voters to move. And I wish we had more cooperation.
Well, you know,
it's going to be ugly.
Given, and I think David might be able to chime in on this one. Given the dynamics over there, the staff is not going to move. There'll be a little movement when you get back up a level or two, and it's not until the superintendent says, you know, we're going to do it. And I think Dr. Smith was pretty clear that there would be some movement.
He was.
Not full, but some. And if we can say, look, you can take those HVAC projects off the list. I don't know what that does to your numbers, but that's a start. And now what if he was going to say, okay, I was going to do 5. You're now taking 5 off a smaller list. But, I mean, I think he was pretty clear that you guys, to the staff, you need to figure something out here to help them out.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
Final decision is the superintendent of schools.
Yes. Well, technically the board, but the board's
The
not.
board has to approve the contracts. So it is technically the board's.
And the whole CIP.
Right. So it's technically
But
the
it's-
board's decision.
But something like these issues, the construction issues, the board hasn't done much to change what the superintendent's put in historically.
My own view, since Mike suggested that I chime in, that I think I've expressed to you all outside of the boardroom, is that I think that it would be a good idea to reach out to board members.
I agree.
In addition to reaching out to the superintendent. I know you already met with the superintendent. I think that's a good thing.
Well, David
Mike Durso
was
I understand Mike Durso was there, and Mike Durso will inform his colleagues of what transpired. But hearing from us or hearing from members of the public is a different experience than hearing it from either the superintendent or the staff or the board president. I do think it is possible that they would have. There's a number of board members who are going to be involved in the 2018 election in one way or another, and they may very well be interested in this issue. Now, because that was not the board's preferred plan, I have not done any outreach to board members.
David, the only thing I would say to that is there is not a much bigger hot potato in MCPS than school modernizations.
Sure.
And I just don't anticipate that the board would say move a modernization back so that the school could be used as a voting place. I just don't.
But you did say that you thought that they're eventually going to have to move something back.
There's no, well, that's what I would anticipate.
There's a good likelihood.
But yes, and in which case they wouldn't have any choice. One is you've got the choice, out of context of everything, you've got the choice of saying, look, we're going to move it 6 months so it could be used as a polling place. I would think that if I were a board member, this is a real easy one. Y'all ain't going to vote. But the realism of the market and how it will be impacted is something else.
My suggestion was not that I thought that by our talking to the board members that everything will be solved in 10 seconds. And it's a very difficult issue, or else we wouldn't be spending all this time on it. My suggestion is just that if we want our kind of equities to be considered, that the more people who are involved in this process, who are familiar with them, the better off we are.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting you don't talk to them. I'm just saying I'd put more hopes in the market right now.
Well, by going to the board members now, would that be like going around the superintendent or kind of undercutting him? Should we wait till he comes up with his final decision?
You're running out of time.
Yeah,
That's my
you're running out of time, and I think politically you're not sidestepping. We were just trying to go up the ladder and not go around the superintendent, but we've already approached the superintendent, and the board president was there, so.
And you're also, it depends on your message. Your message doesn't have to be, the superintendent isn't listening to us. In fact, your message is the opposite. The superintendent is listening to us. We just wanted you to be aware of this.
And it can be actually a thank you note to the president, and just you copied everybody else that thank you for being aware of this very difficult problem.
Well, there's a good idea.
Yeah.
Because if you send a letter to the board president saying thank you for being there, working, yada, 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 that goes out to the whole board.
And then just reiterate the problem.
That's a good
little
idea.
paragraph.
Okay, two things with regards to the public schools. Because of the public notification laws, I really need to get something up. So I would recommend that the week before the meeting, that we include the full list of schools that may be impacted, even if everything comes off the list, but we need to get the public notification up, because this is something that definitely is going to affect voting. And then the other thing that I would like to ask is that the board approve the staff beginning to prepare the 1368 legal description, which splits 1367, which voted at the Tacoma Park Rec Center, and we have the high school, Bosco High School, that is going to serve as a polling place. So I would like to do those two things with the approval of the board.
Let me just step back 1 second. So I will write a letter, a draft, and send it to the board. A letter to the superintendent thanking him for the meeting.
To the board president.
And to the superintendent. That's
you can send it to both of them, but in order for it to go to all the board members, you have to send it to the board president.
Yes.
Okay. Should I CC all the board members, or
no? They'll do it automatically.
And to the superintendent.
Are you sure of that? A thank you note?
I can double check, but it's been that way for 40 years.
No, that's a formality.
Yeah.
So I'm going to draft a letter to Mike Durso.
It can go to Durso and Dr. Smith, but it has to go to Durso.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But I meant
Okay, and I'll send it as a draft to everybody. Okay, now.
Only other comment I just want to make sure we note is that we did also have a discussion about the fact that we can't have this happen again, and the importance we can't have this happen again, and the importance in the future of making sure that we have election dates that are not occurring during the school construction window. And we did have a very good conversation with the superintendent and the staff there about that as well, and it did seem as though there was a general understanding moving forward that we were all in agreement that this was the least ideal time, and hopefully we can work together.
But the legislature sets election dates.
Yes.
Jim, you said there were 60-some thousand
Initially,
people.
63,000.
And then you made some arrangements, and then now there's only
Staff did a lot of work with their staff, and they got it down to 45
down to 45,
plus.
and now we're working on 45. Okay.
We're stuck around 46,000 right now,
Okay.
which is a lot.
Oh, yeah.
But staff did that, and they did a terrific job.
But I really commend you for picking up this issue and working it through, because you are absolutely correct about the importance of it.
I agree.
Thank you. All right, I'll send everybody a draft.
Okay.
All right, so now you want us to do what?
I am requesting that we go ahead and publish or do the public notification for the polling place changes as they appear on 5 days before our board meeting, and then also prepare the legal description for the new 1368, which is the split off of 1367, which we had at Tacoma Park Recreation Center.
Mr. President?
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we authorize the election director and her staff as appropriate to begin notifying the public of all polling place changes necessitated by school construction, as such changes will exist as of 5 days before our next regular meeting. And as part of my motion, I would also move that we authorize the election director to begin preparing the legal description for the new precinct 1368.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comment? David?
A question. I gather the 5 days is the minimum before the next meeting, but I'm wondering whether we want to consider putting that list out sooner.
It'll be on the agenda. I will have a list of all the polling places.
I guess what I'm thinking is that if you want to get people interested in this issue, that putting it out in more than the agenda might be called for, to put something on the website that says these are under consideration. I don't think we're going to get an answer from the superintendent until the 15th of October, is that right? And I think our meeting is the 16th of October.
That's correct.
So I'm thinking that at the very least we should at least allow staff to send it out
Is that
sooner.
possible, Margaret?
Yeah,
That's a good point.
We can get
Yeah.
it up on the website under what's new.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be.
All right.
I think that'd be helpful.
That would be good.
And then the only other thing I was going to mention is that in our packet today is a letter from the mayor of Tacoma Park supporting that precinct change that Margaret mentioned, dividing 1367 and
yeah.
68.
Okay.
So the city is in favor.
So all those in favor of Alex's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes.
Okay, then going on to ballot opening proposal by Jessica White. Jessica, we'd sure appreciate it if you could go fast.
I can go really fast.
And this is regarding,
Reminds of the absentee process to, you guys asked for some, exploring the concept of opening ballots sooner so that we could canvass more efficiently.
so now the law is, for anybody who's listening, you can't open absentee ballots until the polls close,
No, we can't until 2 days later.
2 days later. And our proposal is,
I will go over that.
Yeah, we're about to find out.
I want to go home.
The board does not have a proposal yet.
Yes.
The board asked staff to.
oh, I see.
Well, no, there's recommendations.
It's coming on the wall.
Right.
Exactly right.
You need me to move down? I think I can do it. Okay. There you go.
Okay. So, canvassing absentee ballots, the challenge is you said we can't open them until 2 days after the election, which is by...
Jessica, can you face us so I can hear?
Sure,
Thank
which
you.
is COMAR regulation, actually. The state law says that they can't be opened until at least the Wednesday after the election, but COMAR says the 2 days. So that's what we currently follow. We don't start canvassing, as you know, until 10 a.m. on Thursday. We have to process 15,000 in 8 days, 20,000 have to be duplicated. We want to have quicker results, streamlined process, reduced overhead by combining function, increased accuracy, real-time processing and check-in disposition of the voter registration system. Some comparisons of other states that open sooner. Fairfax County is excuse-based. They do not do early voting in person, but they do in-person absentee, still excuse-based at 10 locations. They do scan their in-person absentee ballots at the 10 centers. They just don't tabulate, just like we do early voting. Return ballots are pre-checked by a team of 12. Their outer envelopes are removed. The ballots are marked and their systems returned. They do not duplicate ballots, they hand count. But they only send out email ballots or faxed ballots for military. They do not broadly broadcast those out. But they do pre-process starting 2.5 weeks prior to Election Day. Only perfect ballots, if you will, are pre-processed by their teams without the presence of their canvas. They do set up teams to work through the ballots for pre-processing, just like a polling place, a chief and assistant chief put together. Like I said, they review process, and they cannot reject ballots as are set aside for the after-election canvas. Denver is an all-mail ballot state now. This kind of correlates to the conversation we were having earlier about additional equipment. If we did in-house mailing, they use all kinds of equipment to automate their process. They have a ballot how machine that dates and timestamps the received ballots, removes the secrecy tab with a laser, compares the barcode on the envelope, and registers it into their voter registration system automatically, captures the signature, and displays it alongside in the voter registration system because they have requirements for signature verification. Then the ballots that are returned from other counties or voters who are ineligible are sorted out automatically by the machine into a separate bin. So when they go to process, it's precinct specific, already adjudicated, put into all these bins, electronic verification that then they can max sort out ballots that aren't verified. The ballots are sliced open after that with high speed, and they use an extractor. The election judges said processing through high-speed scanners. Unreadable ballots are examined by bipartisan teams and duplicated like we do. If they have improper marks under, over, or voter intent is not clear, the ballots sent electronically to teams to adjudicate, which they do electronically within their tabulation system versus us where we take them and recreate them. And then it creates additional log. Different states, different ways. Kansas and Ohio starts 19 days prior, everything up to final results. Arizona processes and tabulates 1 week prior to the election. Missouri, the Thursday before the election, they scan all the ballots then on election day, but they do start processing them ahead. New Mexico, they open, process, and tabulate absentee ballots up to 5 days before the election. Kansas, they canvass, begins 21 days prior. All the recommended counts are processed. They just don't actually tabulate until the night of the election. Board of canvassers, any rejections. Illinois canvass ballots upon receipt, everything up until the final results report. So basically, all these 6 states that are listed do some version of opening absentee ballots ahead of time. None of them actually show results or do their final process until there is election day. Short term, what staff recommendations are today is to implement a pre-screening process similar to the professional process, where the staff research is done ahead of time using bipartisan teams. Kind of what you see in the canvass room now for the regular ballots, where we're doing envelope checking, postmark. We're going to do that on the front end before we get into the canvass rooms. We can use the same process set up by the state to do that and do a recommendation of disposition. And then as the Board of Canvassers, you guys would have the final say. And then also, same thing, if a ballot's in question, it would be held over to be referred to the Board of Canvassers. And then those that are recommended to be accepted would be opened. They would just go into the canvass rooms, put them through an automatic letter opener, and the canvass teams during the 10 days of canvass would just pull those things out of the envelopes. And then we thought using the nursing home teams after they finish their duties by the close of registration would be the good team to have, be the bipartisan teams that could then go on to election to the canvass, so that we have consistency of people who know the rules and we're not training new groups of people. Long-term recommendations is work for our system where we can convene canvass up to 15 days prior to the election and appoint a special board to oversee the process under direct supervision of LBE staff in accordance with established policy procedure. Check in, review, open, duplicate, and enter disposition in the VR system. Referred ballots would still be held for Board of Canvassers. We would scan ballots but not tabulate under this long-term recommendation. Legislative regulatory change. Have to revise that election code to allow us to open prior to 8 a.m. on Wednesday. And then we'd also have to, of course, modify the COMAR. This provision was a cleanup of the absentee ballots, counting one or the other, which you guys already entered a recommendation for, so you're already ahead. And then clarification of the roles and duties of the canvassers, as far as convening a special board of election judges to canvass and what needs to be reviewed and rejected as necessary by the board. Other considerations, if you guys want to further investigate ways of streamlining, is the laws in the COMAR that pertain to reissuing of absentee ballots. This has particularly become an administrative issue related to the way the voter registration system processes changes after a voter has requested an absentee. Also timing of when the ballots are sent out and the deadlines to receive returned absentee ballots. That is all.
Very good. Thank you.
But this is statewide. This has to be statewide. Correct?
Yes, it would have to be statewide.
Well, in the committees that we've discussed this too, the premise would be that there would be latitude within, because some counties, of course, may not need to start 14 days ahead. They may be able to start the day or two, or maybe they want to wait till election day. and they may be able to get their entire canvas done. That would work for us, but.
I mean, 25% of the absentees are from this county,
Montgomery County,
statewide.
yeah.
So,
And there's more, I mean, there's a Mayo committee that was set up to explore this issue in parallel with this board's discussion of this. And honestly, I think there's more of a general sensibility from counties large and small that what we have right now, it would be nice to change that. You know, certainly you do have, as Jessica was just saying, different ways that would play out, you know, based on our rhythms and staffing needs and realities. But I mean, there seems to be a notion of sort of let's try to get to yes on some improvements and changes, not you know, and this isn't like just Montgomery County being Montgomery County and doing something different from everybody else. There's a general discussion along these lines too.
But it is going to require a COMAR change.
And that's a legislative change. Now, I know generally new laws take 3 years to get through when they're brought up
Senator
in mirror.
Kagan said she's open to our.
I was going to say, what is your guess here?
I mean, the COMAR provisions, quite frankly, in some respects conflict with the election law article, so the whole area should be cleaned up. But this whole concept of not being able to do anything to the envelope, to the absentee ballot in a county the size of Montgomery County is, I think, being naive to the realities of how much paper needs to be processed and how quickly it needs to be done.
Do we know what the reason is for the COMAR provision that says Thursday instead of Wednesday?
No, I mean, I put it back up, the exact text of what it actually says.
No, but Jessica's right. The election law article says Wednesday and the COMAR provision says Thursday.
So, I mean, it seems like, at least as an incremental measure, I gather COMAR will be easier. Nothing's easy, but COMAR may be easier to change than the statute. If we could buy ourselves a day if they were to rely on the statute.
Well, and if they eliminated some language regarding the opening of the envelope, I mean, if you could just be able to slip the envelope open, that would make the processing by the teams much quicker. And how you watch people go ahead and full with that envelope opener, you know, trying to.
Is that an issue in terms of security? No, I'm just saying that if we have a bunch of open envelopes, that it makes.
that's why they
That's why.
want us. But I guess Jessica's point is, I think 49 out of 50 states open these ballots and prep them for either scan them before the election day or prep them so that they can be scanned election day. And if we build in security measures to ensure that the ballot, the secrecy of the vote, then I mean, it can be done.
Well, and I will add, not only are we the one out of, only state that does not open them, we're one of the only states that generates this email delivery system for any eligible voter with a no excuse-based system. And so we have more ballots to duplicate, or if hand count was the rule or whatever, than any other state. I mean, Alaska has a somewhat similar kind of idea of system, but it's still not beginning to be on the scale of what we do. So we uniquely have far more of a job to get done, and we started as the last of any state in the country. I mean, and in most states, the political pressures that a lot of people get are when there's close races, and it's 10 days out on this ballot processing. So 49 other states have got to the knothole of having these bipartisan teams take these ballots out of the envelope and run them through the scanner, even if they don't hit the show me the totals, just like we do in early voting.
But Kevin, wouldn't that also require a possible change in the statute as not requiring the Board of Canvassers to be physically present when that work is done?
Correct.
So what's the process, Kevin, to move forward?
Well, I think if the board is supportive, I mean, I think it would be wonderful to get a letter to someone like Senator Kagan to go ahead and suggest that these are changes that should be made moving forward.
We might want to hear from the public on some of these changes.
How do we do that? Public comment. We put that on our website. How does that work? To get public comment?
Put it on a future agenda item.
Yeah, we can put it on a future agenda item. And we could do a public notification, do a press release, and have public. Obviously, we would want, the political parties to weigh in.
Yeah.
But again, I cannot emphasize enough, Maryland is so far
No, I know.
behind all the other states.
I know.
Why we're holding on to these ballots. And now that we're doing all of this back-end auditing,
Right.
we're going to be running into the Constitution requirement so that all the county officials get sworn in by the first Monday of December. If you recall, we were on the first Wednesday of December certifying the election. So,
Which was before the first Monday of December.
Well, I think public comment, or at least the opportunity, would give us more
thank you.
backing, more credibility.
Well, but a lot of public comment is going to come during the legislative process anyways, I would think.
Yeah.
That's when you're going to get news coverage and everything.
And as Allison said, this is an issue that is also being pursued by a group that's staffed by most of the LBEs in the state through the Mayo as well. So
Maybe this is something you could bring up to the biennial meeting also, to the state board and the state board staff.
And this would be, I mean, this not only all the other things we talked about, but also as a cost driver, this would save a lot of money to not touch these ballots multiple times.
Where is Mako in it? Where, at what point are they in their deliberations?
I have not had any
Mako or
conversations
Mayo?
with Mako
Mayo,
about
Mayo,
it.
Mayo. Thank you.
Mayo is, we've got various staff of various LBEs who have sort of written up some white paper ideas. The committee has not yet come together and had a meeting
So
to
they're just in the
take a
embryonic
vote
stage.
on a recommendation. Well, quite honestly, I'm the chair of the committee, and I don't know what position this board wants me to take. So I'm also not really ready to have that conversation, to have a final position of Mayo, until I really feel like I've got this board's
You wanna open
backing
it back?
on the approach that we take.
But I will say that I thought, and I think you thought the same thing, that it was a surprise when there was a movement to convene such a committee within Mayo to explore the possibility of this, because it had seemed like, previously there had not been that type of desire, and I think overall there was a general movement that they really wanted to pursue this after the last election and try to figure out a way to solve the problems that we're running into in the canvas process.
I mean, the reality is I think we're all looking at a significant enough percentage of our ballots now that are absentee or provisional that we're all in an increasing place of figuring we got more of a chance that the final outcomes of contests are going to be held up until these procedures are done.
What about the thought of, at the October meeting, that you call Ellie Wang in Baltimore and call maybe Anne Arundel's chairman, and the three of you present this to that meeting as something that we need to do?
Okay. I can do that.
And I will contact
Thanks,
the
Jackie.
state
That's a good
board
idea.
to say that there's a consideration that it should be discussed at the biennial meeting.
Okay.
And then Jim's going to make a
Yeah,
presentation. Sure.
I'll call the other presidents of the big counties. Yeah.
And should we bring this back up in the November board meeting?
Yes.
And certainly if you guys have any questions and you want any additional information.
Especially if you want it to come up in the legislative session in January.
Yeah.
At least to start the process.
Thanks, Jessica. That was good.
Okay, Roberto. We have National Voter Registration Day. And Roberto is heading up some of our outreach.
Okay.
Okay, go.
So National Voter Registration Day is next Tuesday, September 26th. Listed are a listing of locations. They were strategically selected by participant turnouts at the specific county facilities. We're going to be doing up county, mid county.
I'm sorry, how did you pick the locations?
By looking at the agencies with the highest foot traffic on the Tuesday. And also it will facilitate voters or individuals interested in registering to vote to go to one of those locations. So in addition to the Board of Elections, we have those locations as well. Also as a breakdown of our outreach breakdown since the beginning of the year, These are the numbers. We have 18 cancellations. We've completed 118 events. We have 57 lined up, confirmed as of now. We were turned down 36 times. And that's because the events didn't coincide. It was either health related or a type of form where they thought that we wouldn't fit. But we did approach them, and we thank them for the opportunity to receive our invitation. And also pending, we have 36 pending locations for a total of 245 events. We're very active in the community. Overall, if you have any contacts or any events that you know of with your corresponding contacts, just let me know and we'll send our team out.
Thank you, Roberto. That's all I've got, Mr. President.
Okay. Can I ask a question?
Sure. Did you have some new business?
I do. I have two new business items, but I first have a question about the naturalization ceremony. It's listed on our list as private. I wanted to know, first, is it open to board members? And second, if naturalization ceremonies are typically private.
So initially this conversation came up as a kickoff for National Voter Registration when we did our lessons learned. Then I approached Naturalization and Homeland Security. We had a walkthrough about 2 weeks ago, Margie. They came to visit the site, and it was clear that they are using our facility to hold their events.
Right.
And they did not want media, any type of press, because at times some of the individuals becoming naturalized may have asylum. And then we took it. So we're facilitating the usage of training room 1 and 2, and that's what we're doing. And that's why we didn't use it as a kickoff for National Voter Registration Day.
And additionally, because of the number of people that are coming for that, there will be basically no additional parking available on site. It is their program, under their direction. I cannot sit here, nor can Margaret or Alberto, and say that board members cannot come. There is not going to be an opportunity where a board member would be introduced. There is not going to be an opportunity where a board member would be giving comments. It is a very tight schedule, and the public is not invited to this event. It is a invitation-only event, and we are doing everything we can to provide them the use of our space, but to maintain their requirements and their policies as the event unfolds.
Sure. No, I just hear that they're very nice events, and I'm the son of a naturalized citizen, and I just think it's a great thing that we're doing. So.
Thank you.
Ben, you had some new business?
Yes. First item of new business, I was wondering, and this could either be at a board meeting or it could be offline, but I was wondering if we could get a briefing about the planned training dates, times, and locations for the upcoming election, just to make sure that we're spreading out the dates, times, and locations, and that we're avoiding any of the dates that we would need to avoid.
Yes, sir. We can.
Can we in October?
Can we do it in January?
When does the training start, and when do you have to nail down the sites?
Training won't start until March.
Okay.
So, but right now you have early voting and polling place changes.
Oh, I know we have a lot on our agenda.
Yes.
I'm not suggesting we have to do it sooner than we have to do it.
I would suggest January.
Okay. As long as there's still time at that point if changes need to be made.
Okay.
That's my only concern.
Okay.
Okay. And then my second new business item is a motion that I'd like to make to that the board president send a letter this week to the governor requesting that he promptly appoint a successor to fill the substitute member position formerly held by Gracie, who resigned 10 weeks ago, and the recommendation for a replacement was submitted 8 weeks ago. When I was appointed to the board to fill a vacancy, I was sworn in within a week of the vote of the Central Committee.
That didn't happen to me, man. My appointment went for June. They didn't do it until September because the governor was new, was busy. They didn't have time to do that.
Okay.
And they apologized to me, but that's fine.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, here we
I
are.
didn't go after them.
Here we are in September.
Yeah.
It's been 8 weeks since it was sent, and I think today was a good example of why we need more board members. If I had a work emergency or tripped on my way to my car or whatever, you can't have a board meeting without a Democratic member. And I would think that it would be in the board's interest to have our full complement of members in order to avoid situations like that.
Yeah, I called the governor's office maybe 2 weeks ago-ish, maybe 3 weeks ago. I just asked what the time frame was, and they said it's on the consideration plate, but there were many other issues ahead of it, and they said they'd get to it in time. They didn't know if they'd get to it before today, but it's on the plate in the normal process of appointments.
Well, I would just say that in the scheme of appointments that the governor makes, this is usually not the hardest one because it's done at the recommendation of the party organizations. They want to make sure that they're not appointing someone who's a criminal, and usually they otherwise follow those recommendations. As Margaret just pointed out, we have a very busy agenda coming up in the coming months, and I just think it would be good if the board were to express to the governor our desire that this happens.
The governor usually don't appoint one person. Usually it's a whole bunch of appointments which they prepare, and then he act on all those appointments. Not just, I'm just telling you, I'm not against you. I'm saying that's how it goes.
Yeah, and that is true for when the normal appointments are made. But when vacancies are filled, it happens all different ways.
Not really. For vacancy,
I
not vacancy.
I can tell you my experience.
Usually,
I
for
got
vacancy, the acting go until the governor get appointed. But anyhow, as far as I know, they prepare whole bunch of appointee and things, and then they send it to governor. He doesn't act on one versus the other one. They all go together.
Well, Alex, Jackie, your thoughts?
I don't have any opinion. I don't know. I think it's a little premature. I don't want to be sort of telling the governor that he ought to get off his stuff and do something like. I mean, if it drags on, then maybe there might be a diplomatic way to remind him. I think right now, I think it's premature.
Not a high priority for him.
Well, respectfully, I think it should be a high priority for us. Like I said, we have big decisions coming up next month. We also have the state meeting that's a required meeting coming up next month. It would be good for whoever is appointed to be able to attend that meeting.
Oh, I think he could attend. I don't think that's a problem. Of course he can attend.
Well, whoever. I mean, we don't know who it's going to be.
Well,
so,
that's true.
So I'm not sure that. I don't think you can prejudge the governor's appointment before he makes it. So. Since the law does require that the party committees submit multiple names. So anyway, that's my motion. You guys can second it, vote for it or not. I think it would be a good idea for the board. I don't think you want to be in a situation where you're unable to meet because we don't have enough members.
Yeah, my thinking is. I agree with Alex. I think at the next meeting, it might be time to reconsider this because then it would be more than 2 months, I guess.
It's already 2 months. It's been 10 weeks since Gracie resigned, 8 weeks since the governor received the recommendation. That was in late July. We're now in September.
That's my view. Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second? No second, so motion is defeated. Okay, we have to now go into executive session
Will we get to close this?
for a personnel issue.
I move we go to executive session.
Second? Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay, we're going to move into executive session. So
Okay.
now we're back in open session,
Right.
and is there a motion on the table?
I move we accept the executive meeting.
You moved to,
Oh, I second.
and what's the date of those meetings?
That is for the June 19th executive session minutes.
June 19th,
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there a
Move
motion to
adjourn.
adjourn? Second?
I move. Second.
All those in favor? Aye.